All right, good evening, everyone. Alexis, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
One honor. Place your right hand over your heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. City Clerk, can we have a roll call of the Monday, April 15th meeting?
Yes, Councilmember Duran.
Here.
Councilmember Heilman.
Here.
Councilmember Meister. Here. Mayor Pro Tem Horvath.
Here.
Mayor D'Amico.
Yes, here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Approval of the agenda. Are there any changes from the City Clerk's office?
Yes, staff has requested that item 2N be tabled to a future meeting. And that is...
2N is an item to amend the lease agreement at 8916 Santa Monica Boulevard with Coots LLC.
Yes.
Okay.
5B, staff has requested that 5B be tabled, as well as item 2O.
All right, and 2O is the item for job training and work opportunities for community members experiencing homelessness, and 5B, as in boy, is the item for purchasing Rule 20A allocations from the City of Linwood for utility undergrounding projects.
Yes.
Those three items. All right, any changes from us?
Mayor, I would request that we pull item 2P.
Item 2P is the Equity Oversight Panel.
Yes.
Yes, we'll pull that.
And I don't know if we could move item 5E to consent?
I only have two hands. Here we go. Item 5E is a sponsorship of a panel discussion on sex workers. Any objection? All right, make those comments during your comments. Okay.
And then I apologize, I am not ready for commission appointments tonight. Not my direct, and I haven't interviewed everyone for the public safety. So I don't know if everyone else is ready tonight, I could probably go forward, but.
There's no problem, I'm saying out loud as a question, with the Public Safety Commission membership or the others. I think that's fine. They've been reaching their quorum, so, all right, without objection, we'll put that off till another meeting. Any other items for our consent calendar? All right, so we have a motion and a second. Mark your votes to adopt the agenda.
Mayor D'Amico?
Yes.
I just want to have a point of clarification for the audience. So item 5E has been moved to consent. There are a number of speakers who wanted to speak on that item. If you still wish to speak on that item, you can speak during public comment, which is coming up. Okay?
And you will move those to the public comment and they'll be heard?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you.
Mayor,
This was something we practiced and I forgot to do, so I want to thank you for making that happen. Yes.
Can item 5A on the 30-year anniversary of LGAB go on consent?
Yes, I'm happy to move the funding for item 5A, request for supplemental funding for event commemorating the 30th anniversary of the city's LGAB.
I think that there's,
We have
I'm
to
not
make some
sure
elections.
there's a choice that we have to make here, though.
There is.
Yeah. I think staff is suggesting that we combine it with the annual key event, and I think LGAB would prefer to do it as a separate, so we need to make a decision.
We did give you options, so if you want to go with the LGAB's recommendation and do the funding, you could just make that as part of the movement to consent.
You want to have a debate about it?
Well, I think I would like to discuss it.
All right. Item 5A remains on our regular agenda. We have a motion to adopt in a second. Terrific. We have an agenda.
So, Mr. Mayor, the report from the closed session is not
listed here. And so could I just briefly advise the council that we did convene our closed session at 6 o'clock tonight. There were no public comments on the closed session agenda. One item was added, and that is the matter of pending litigation entitled City of West Hollywood versus AKA/Corman Communities. So that was added by a vote of the City Council because the item came up after the posting of the agenda, and there was no reportable action taken tonight in closed session. Thank you, Mayor.
And I think it actually is worth saying that the closed session came up in some way after posting the agenda, and I think we forgot to modify the agenda showing we were having a closed
There you
session.
go. Right. So we added a closed session.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
And then had a discussion and then had a comment on, okay. Adjournment motions, any adjournment motions? Councilmember
Yes, I
Heilman?
have one. I'd like to request that we adjourn in memory of Barbara Keller. Barbara was a well-known philanthropist and restaurateur in the Coachella Valley. She was one of the owners of the successful restaurant Lulu's in the valley, but she was also known for her 25 years of volunteering and service on the board of the Palm Springs Art Museum. She was an active fundraiser for the Desert AIDS Project. She was a member of that 10 years. She served as chairwoman for 4 years. She was also the co-chair of the annual dinner for 7 years for the Desert AIDS Project, and she helped raise more than $10 million to support services for people living with HIV and AIDS. She received many awards for her humanitarian efforts, including the Volunteer of the Year, and for all of her service. She died recently of cancer, and I'd request that we adjourn in her memory.
Without objection. Councilmember Mayor Pro Tem Horvath?
Thank you. As is our tradition in the city of West Hollywood to adjourn our council meetings in honor of the military service personnel who were killed in service to our country since our last meeting. They are Corporal Robert A. Hendricks, age 25, Sergeant Benjamin S. Hines, age 31, and Staff Sergeant Christopher K. A. Slutman, age 43. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Duran or Councilmember Meister? No. All right. I have 2 adjournment motions. First, the mother of one of our city staff members, Beth Rosen, passed away. Without objection, we can adjourn in her memory. And also a friend of mine passed away since our last meeting, Wes Ford. And Wes was a terrific guy that I think changed the world for the better. I met Wes in 1994. He was a dedicated public servant with a heart of gold. Wes was a boss, a friend, an ally, a smart voice, a champion for young people in their struggle to find themselves, a true believer in the power of good people doing good work. As he and others, several of us, worked together at the LA County on the Young Men's Survey, a survey of young men 15 to 22 in the early 1990s. Wes always knew that no one thing solves any problem, that life is additive, and that careful attention and incremental action makes everything bearable. And he instilled that in me. And it's always a good reminder to know that there are terrific people who work for the government, who care, who want to make the world a better place. And Wes was one of those people who was genuinely committed to making the world a better place. So I would ask if you have a moment and can think of a person in your life who worked tirelessly to make the world a better place in a regular way, in a regular job, and made your life a little better, it would be nice to remember Wes through that person. So without objection, I'd like to adjourn in his memory as well. This evening, we have several presentations. I think, fellow council members, why don't we do our census presentation at the top of our presentations? And we've all been given a little script, so If it's not too wonky, I will begin, and tonight's lesson is about the census. Census 2020. As you know, the U.S. Constitution requires that every American be counted every 10 years. The census will take place on April 1st, 2020. In preparation for that important day, we in West Hollywood are getting ready to do that. To do all that is needed to ensure that every West Hollywood resident participates in the census by responding to the census survey questionnaire, answering the door to census workers, being interested in making sure that you're counted. Therefore, tonight we launch our city census campaign. I would like to invite my colleagues to read their statements, and afterwards the census staff and we will join them down there nearby that poster and unveil the West Hollywood Census Campaign's poster.
I'll go next. The census is a snapshot of our community. And as they say, if you are not counted, you don't exist. And if you don't exist, then the federal government assigns fewer resources to your community, to our city of West Hollywood. The nonpartisan Legislative Analyst's Office of California estimated that during the 1990 census, California's population was undercounted by 2.7%. This undercount likely resulted in California receiving at least $2 billion less in federal funds than we deserved.
Thank you. As the mayor mentioned, city staff will be working collaboratively with census personnel, and you all can join this effort and become a city census ambassador. In the next few weeks, the city will host the first meeting of the Complete Count Committee, and the public will be invited to attend. And for more information, you can visit our website, www.weho.org/census2020.
Thank you. So why should we care? Data from the decennial census is also used to apportion electoral districts. An inaccurate, incomplete count also impacts the state's representation in Congress. According to the LAO, that's the Legislature's Analyst's Office, the 1990 census undercount was severe enough that the state was shortchanged one congressional seat. If you don't get counted, we all lose representation.
And Councilmember Duran. Talk about the census.
Yeah, I get that, but it seems like everybody's reading something.
Paragraph of something to read.
Oh, I don't have anything in front of me. So.
All right. Well, on behalf of Councilmember Duran,
Yeah.
I encourage you to answer
You know what?
census.
I'll just add, since I'm the national chair of NALEO, and NALEO has been in the courts taking on the issue of whether or not it's lawful for the Trump administration to ask people if they are, in fact, a U.S. citizen, and that is being litigated. It's really important that people not be intimidated by the current administration and participate in the census, regardless of their citizenship, their residency, or their language. Everyone should participate.
Sounds perfect. All right. Let's go down there, and Hernan will help us by revealing the census poster.
Good evening. My name is Carlos Botifol. I'm a partnership specialist with the U.S. Census Bureau. And thank you so much for your words. Mr. Dodan, thank you as well. I think you were right on the money about the confidentiality issue, and hopefully for the residents of West Hollywood to participate in the census and not be intimidated, since all the answers contained in the questionnaire are 100% confidential. We never share any information, personal information, with any other government agency. And that's the law. We're prohibited from sharing information. I would like to thank this council for supporting the formation of a complete count committee. The committee is a great tool toward achieving the goal of full participation in the 2020 census. And when individuals fill out their questionnaires next year, they will be helping to shape our future, the future of our communities and of our nation. I really love what West Hollywood is doing. I love the campaign, the look of it. I want to thank Mr. Hernán Molina for his creativity, his hard work and energy. Thank you so much. And I would again like to thank the mayor and all the members of this council. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming by and engaging with us. Thank you. We have one more presentation, maybe two. Arbor Day is first. So, are there public facilities commissioners here? Would you like to come forward? Hello. All right. So, my favorite holiday of the year, Arbor Day, is right around the corner, and in 1872, J. Sterling Morton proposed to the Nebraska Board of Agriculture that a special day be set aside for the planting of trees, and we here in West Hollywood do also observe Arbor Day. This holiday is called Arbor Day, was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska. In 2019 is the 147th anniversary of the holiday, and Arbor Day is now observed throughout the nation and the world. Trees reduce topsoil erosion, urban heat, island effect. They save energy by reducing heating and cooling costs, moderate ambient temperatures, and they're fine and good-looking pieces of living agriculture. Trees in our city protect biodiversity, enhance the economic vitality of business areas, and beautify our community. The City of West Hollywood proclaims April 27, 2019 as Arbor Day in the City of West Hollywood and urges all citizens to celebrate the day. Join us in our efforts to protect our trees and woodlands, and come out on that Saturday and join us and help plant some trees in West Hollywood. So if you all would like to join us in celebrating Arbor Day, that would be great.
Good evening. Thank you so much, Mayor Pro Tem, council members. My name is Noemi Torres, and I'm Chair of the Public Facilities Commission, here with my fellow Commissioner Larry Block. The mayor pretty much already covered everything about Arbor Day, but what I did want to remind everybody is that we are going to be celebrating it at Laurel Park at 9 a.m. We'll be planting 6 trees, so I hope everyone can make it as well as home. Thank you so much, and have a good day.
Thank you very much. We'll see you on Arbor Day. You have a presentation also.
Thank you, Mayor. From time to time, we have the pleasure of honoring some very important people in our community. And just this past week, we got to celebrate a very important birthday of Wendy Dio, who's a beloved member of our community. For those who don't know her, she's the wife and longtime manager to the late legendary heavy metal singer, rock singer, Ronnie James Dio. And after his death from stomach cancer in 2010, she founded the Ronnie James Dio Stand Up and Shout for Cancer Fund, a nonprofit organization aimed at supporting research and education that furthers early detection, prevention, and treatment of prostate, colon, and stomach cancers. And since its founding, the organization has raised millions of dollars through events like the annual Ride for Ronnie motorcycle Ride and Live concert, and plans to continue to support organizations that are committed to cancer research and education. She continued many of the advocacy efforts that he spearheaded, including serving as chairman of the nonprofit organization Children of the Night, which provides interventions in the lives of children who are sexually exploited and vulnerable to or involved in prostitution and pornography. Wendy and Ronnie's love for animals inspired them to become involved with several animal rescue organizations, including the Brittany Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to the rescue, care, and placement of homeless dogs. And Wendy continues to honor her husband's legacy by being a steadfast advocate in our community for music and the arts, animal rights, women's rights, military veterans, and other vulnerable populations. And Wendy is just an extraordinary philanthropist. She gives of herself. She is iconic in our music history up on the Sunset Strip, but she's not just our history. She's our living, present activism, and we thank her for all that she does. And as I mentioned, her birthday was on April 10th, so we would like to proclaim April 10th as Wendy Dio Day in the city of West Hollywood and commend her for her many contributions to our community. If you please come forward, I'll ask my colleagues to join me.
Just want to say thank you so much. This is a very unexpected honor, and I'm overwhelmed. I just love to do things to raise money for good causes, and I will continue to do that for any cause I feel is something that we need to raise money for. I think cancer is something that we need to find a cure for. We're trying very hard with research and education to get early detection, saves lives. Animals need saving. We don't need to have any more just breeding. There's so many rescue animals that are just lovely. And thank you all so very much, Mayor, Council people. Thank you so much. I'm very honored. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, now we will begin our public comment period. The city values your comments, however, pursuant to the Brown Act. Council cannot take action on items not listed on the posted agenda. The public comment period is limited to 20 minutes, with 2 minutes allotted for each speaker. The public comment period is to address the City Council on consent items, other agenda items, or items of general interest within the jurisdiction of the city. We have a good number of speakers, and we will begin with Esther Baum, followed by Marquita Thomas.
Esther Baum, 29-year resident of West Hollywood, and I'd like to speak on a problem that seniors are afraid of facing: rent increases. I would like the City Council to consider limiting rent increases, which are cost of living, to 2%. Rents have gone up a great deal in the past year or so, and cost of living has gone up. If you add cost of living to the rent increases, it gets to be beyond what seniors who are living on Social Security can pay, and they'll become homeless. This is a fear of a great many of our seniors. So I'd like you to consider a maximum of 2%, no matter how high the cost of living goes, because I think it will be 4% minimum for the coming year. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Baum. Marquita Thomas, be followed by Steve Martin.
Good evening, Mayor and members of Council. My name is Marquita Thomas. I'm a West Hollywood resident, and tonight I'm speaking on behalf of the Lesbian and Gay Advisory Board in support of items 2P and 5E. On item 2P, LGAB supports West Hollywood working with the CEOP. As the city has done in other situations, sometimes it just makes sense to put important decisions in the hands of impartial third parties. On item 5E, in response to recent tragedies in West Hollywood, I asked the LGAB staff liaisons to place an item on a future agenda informing the board of current programming supporting sex workers. So I'm personally very pleased to see council considering this panel. Sex work is an unfortunate reality for many disenfranchised individuals. The LGAB board hopes council not only approves this panel, but that it will be the first in a series of programs that not only destigmatize sex workers, but also provides resources and education. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much. Steve Martin, I believe item 2N was tabled, but you can speak on it.
Oh, just briefly.
Okay. And then following Steve will be John Sessa.
Steve Martin, West Hollywood. Well, I actually will speak on 2R because I also talked that, but thank you for sponsoring the West Hollywood cheerleaders. That's greatly appreciated. I do want to echo what Esther Baum was talking about, because with our 3% increase, the increase that was close to 4% this last year, I had a number of people that I know that were really nervous about how that was going to impact them taking the full amount. Some of the rents that people are paying are pretty high, and we have a huge number of people on Social Security. So we need to be really cognizant about where we're going with that, because it does impact, you know, people who, like Esther, who've lived here a long, long time. I also want to thank you for your outreach on the census. But I think John Duran would agree, we're missing a component here, because we have a unique opportunity here, because we have resources in two ways. We have tens of thousands of people who work in the hospitality industry in West Hollywood who may or may not have legal status. And it's important for us to have a full count for California to benefit, because we still have to educate children, we still have to provide health care for people on an emergency basis. There's lots of reasons why everyone needs to be counted. A lot of communities where a lot of our employees live don't have the resources to do the outreach that we need to do here, because we can actually help California and our community by making sure that we're doing outreach in Spanish at our bus benches, in our buses, posters that are actually informative and reassure people why they can take part in the census in Spanish, and post it in places where people work, because we have an ability to do more than most communities, and I think we should rise to the challenge. Oh, I know you will. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. John Sessa, to be followed by Adine and Iluna.
Hello, everyone. I'm John Sessa, resident of West Hollywood. Thank you for having us, and thank you for also recommending to co-sponsor our World Dog Day again this year. It will be the 4th annual year that we do it. This will be the 2nd year, hopefully, that the City of West Hollywood will be co-sponsoring the event. Yearly now, we get up to about 4,000 to 5,000 people that attend the event with their dogs. It's a lovely event that ends up bringing everyone from the culture, from the community, to really celebrate dogs and what we're doing with the Vanderpump Dog Foundation. So I would really appreciate another year with you guys and another fun event.
John, are you going to have adoptions again?
Yes, we'll have adoptions with our organization and then one other organization. So we should have about 20 dogs there.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's terrific. Adina Nailuna, to be followed by Alex Illing.
Good evening, council members and Mayor Pro Tem. My name is Aiden Anailuna, I use they them pronouns, and I'm speaking on behalf of item 5E for the sponsorship of a panel for discussion of sex workers. I think it's imperative to consider boosting the support and empowerment of sex workers, especially in West Hollywood, where unfortunately we're at the crux of the sex work capital within LA County. And so we have to really be mindful of the fact that a lot of our homeless individuals who are engaging in street economies like sex work aren't currently being represented as far as their voices, and this panel will be an opportunity to bring to light all the violence and struggles and the challenges that come with doing street economy in West Hollywood if you're a full-time sex worker. And so I would also stress the importance of making sure that you check into accounts with who are sex workers and to hear their voices and to see what the needs are before doing this panel. I really appreciate the support for having this discussion point on the City Council agenda, but we're running into the same issue with the census in that potentially folks who are sex workers may feel a little resistant of having to share their comments in a city-sponsored setting that could potentially lead to further investigation in terms of how they're making their money or whether they're doing it lawfully or unlawfully. So going back to the comments for the census and increasing confidentiality, I think that should also be a concern as well for folks who are planning this panel and discussion. But otherwise, I thank you for your support and thank you for having this discussion here at this agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Alex Illing, to be followed by Alexandra Magallan.
Hello. My name is Alex Ealing, and I'm a health educator working in HIV research here in LA County. I'm here today to provide public comment in support of item 5E. As a health educator, it is my job to provide sexual health education to help people make informed and empowered decisions with their sex lives. But as a sex worker ally, I have to witness how existing laws, policies, and attitudes fail to do so. For example, there are still laws on the books that put sex workers at risk for arrest for the number of condoms that they are carrying. So if we believe and preach in risk reduction in the hopes of lowering new HIV and STI rates, then why do we continue to criminalize safer sex practices? If we do not publicly voice our support of sex workers by creating safe spaces that centers their rights and safety as people, we are then silently complacent in the rampant abuse, discrimination, and violence that they face, simply trying to survive. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alex. Alexandra Magallan, to be followed by Bella Bethori.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Alexandra Magallon. I am a client advocate for the Transgender Economic Empowerment Project. I am also co-chair of the Transgender Service Provider Network, and I am a board of directors CSWLA Pride. Today, I come to speak on behalf of, in support of 5E for sponsorship of a panel discussion on sex workers. As an ex-sex worker myself, it is imperative that we start to have these difficult conversations with one another and start to talk about how this impacts the lives of sex workers. I was homeless. I was homeless in different parks in the area. I was homeless all over LA, and the only way that I could be able to survive and be able to live is through sex work and through the sex economy. I have made it this far. I am one of the people that has had that the power to do so. Not everyone has that power to be able to uplift themselves, and if they resort to sex work, then that is what life has planned for them, unfortunately, or fortunately for them. So I am an advocate for the transgender and community and for those who have had to lived in the sex economy or had to do sex to survive. And I want to also address the destigmatization that one has for somebody who is a sex worker. So just want to say thank you for all that the city of West Hollywood is doing. I appreciate every single one of you and all that you do. And please continue to support the transgender and the sex work community. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bella Bathory, to be followed by Lynn, et cetera.
Hello, council members. Thank you for adding this to the agenda. My name is Bella Bathory. I am the co-director of the Sex Workers Outreach Project. I am a consensual sex worker. I am not disenfranchised. I am college educated and really proud of what I do for work. I have bought a home. I paid for my entire education and funded several nonprofit organizations with my sex work. And I just wanted to read a few numbers for you guys that we have collected through Swap Sacramento. So the first quarter, we've gotten 86 total arrests. That's 77 adult females, 1 adult male buyer, 4 pimps, and 7 juveniles. That's 4% traffickers. The expenses year to date are $44,000. And in Oakland, 7 out of 9 of their wards are no longer arresting sex workers. In the city of Los Angeles in 2017, we had over 3,900 arrests. 90% of those were black and brown bodies. You should be listening to sex workers because we're doing the work with trafficking. Our voices need to be heard, and you guys have the power to make this a big change and save a bunch of money in the process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bella. Lynn, et cetera, to be followed by Joseph Boltmus.
Lynn, et cetera, West Hollywood. I'm very observant. One of the things I've noticed in the times I've been here now over the years is how all the council members and city employees genuinely like you, Mr. Duran. It truly shows. Now there is this dilemma. I don't dislike you, Mr. Duran. I apologize I got angry at you at the closing of the Chris Brownlee Hospice, but not for the reason of my anger, sadistic mismanagement at West Hollywood Community Housing. We now have a good management company. Soon there's going to be a documentary released about Connie Norman. I remember you, Mr. Duran, from ACT UP. If Connie were alive, most likely she would be here speaking to you, Mr. Duran, because this is larger than you. It involves community within liberal communities, marriages, if you will. A simple example is you were a speaker at one of the women's marchers shortly after the City Hall Council deputy settlement. I imagine the person who approved you to speak now has to deal with colleagues. The incredible beauty about Connie Norman was her ability to moderate a debate about something, and all sides of the story got equal unbiased time to speak. All were heard. If you're not going to respectfully resign for the sake of the community, in the spirit of Connie and ACT UP, I propose the council schedule a question and answer where, with or without you, a people's discussion is heard. We all need to heal from this. This is hard. This is hard for the council members. This is hard for the community. Let's talk about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Joseph Boltman, to be followed by Lauren Banuelos. Oh, there you go, Joseph.
Good evening, council and staff. My name is Joseph Boltman, and I've worked at MedMen WeHo for over a year. I'm also a proud member of UFCW 770. I and my 60 team members at MedMen WeHo wish to thank you for your hard work during this continued licensing process. I am also personally grateful for your support in ensuring cannabis remains accessible in this community. We and our other colleagues who work in cannabis retail businesses in the city of West Hollywood are eagerly looking forward to the next update on the status of the licensing process. Consistent updates on how the process is moving forward help those of us who depend on the existing legacy shops for employment, healthcare, and other benefits to plan our livelihoods. Personally, I depend on MedMen for my fully employer-paid healthcare. We look forward to the next update presented by the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. Lauren Banuelos, to be followed by Scott Schmidt.
Good evening. My name is Lauren Banuelos, and I'm the general manager at the West Hollywood MedMen. I came to speak to thank you for the extension on our license that we were granted back in March. Because of this extension, our 60 employees, Joey included, were able to continue their access to their fully covered health benefits as well as maintain their employment. In addition, I'd like to share that since then, we've assisted over 25,000 people on their cannabis needs and are working towards supporting the community by volunteering at Project Angel Food next Thursday, and then hosting an SBCA LA donation fund within our store. Should we not see an extension in our license past December 31st, 2019, I remind you that my 60 employees and growing team will lose their benefits as well as their employment. As the City of West Hollywood continues to assess the option of grandfathering the pre-existing 4 dispensaries, I'm here to remind you that we are appreciative of your time and energy that you are putting into this matter. I'm eager to hear updates and look forward to continue serving our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Scott Schmidt, to be followed by Alexis Sanchez.
Hi, good evening. Scott Schmidt, resident of West Hollywood, and introducing myself and a new organization called the Adult Use Retailers of West Hollywood, which is a membership group of the top 8 scoring adult retail cannabis licensees, which represent approximately 3/4 of the licensees across all of the 5 categories here in West Hollywood. Our goal is to be responsible partners with the committee, with the city, with the community, help do things like stabilize employment if possible as we move forward through the process and under the guise of the process that was laid out at the beginning. We all agreed a year ago to enter into an application process based on the ordinance that you adopted, and it's important that the terms that we apply it under are the terms that we move forward with. And finally, I'm here tonight just to really thank Paul Aravallo, John Leonard, Jackie Rocco for the time, their diligence, they get beat up a lot by folks in these issues, and so for taking that heat and for all of their work for the city, I just want to give them props, a thank you, and a commendation. Have a nice evening.
Thank you, Mr. Schmidt. Alexis Sanchez, be followed by our last speaker, Elke Schliwa, pardon me, Elke. Just one moment. If anyone else wishes to speak during public comment, please bring your slip down. Otherwise, the last 2 speakers will go.
Excellent. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. I am here to speak just in support of item 5C. My background is in public health, and there's something that I always say, harm reduction saves lives, and it's impossible to put a cost on a human life. Within the last few years, we've seen fentanyl start to make its way into other drugs. We've seen it start to appear in methamphetamine, cocaine, drugs. The people who would be using these don't expect to see any of those things, and we'll see overdoses and other things like that stem from it. Fentanyl test strips are something that are relatively inexpensive. It's just a little strip that you dissolve the substance in water, you put the strip in the water that it's dissolved in, and you can see if there's fentanyl present in that. It's relatively inexpensive, and it's easy to increase access, and it has the potential to save countless lives. So I just implore that you look at the full range of options when it comes to harm reduction, from fentanyl test strips to safe injection sites, syringe exchanges. Just look at what would work for the city and keep an open mind. I'd also like to applaud council for moving 5E to consent. I think putting forth a panel on sex workers and seeing how we can best serve the community is very much in line with the values of the city. So thank you again.
Thank you, Alexis. Elke Schliwa is our final speaker, and Elke, I'm sorry if I messed up your name. All right, that's all of our speakers. Council member comments? Who would like to begin? Anyone? Councilmember Heilman?
I just have a very few remarks tonight. First, I wanted to report that I attended the West Side Cities Council of Government meeting recently. We had a discussion about a number of items of concern to the West Side, including transportation and homelessness. Item number 2I, I just wanted to clarify, this is something we left on consent. It's a request for proposals for a climate action plan. I did talk to staff. This is really a designed to update our existing climate action plan and develop implementation measures. So I wanted to thank staff for bringing that forward. Item 2.0 I know was tabled, but as staff looks at that, I would really think staff should look at our WEST program. They do really good work, but what I'm hearing from people who are using it is that there aren't a lot of local jobs that are identified there. So that's something that I think they may need some assistance reaching out to local businesses. And then finally, Steve Martin made a suggestion about our census poster and having them available in different languages, as well as publicizing to employees in the area. And I think that's a very valuable suggestion, and I think Hernan is still here, so I'm going to ask Hernan if he could follow up on that and expand our outreach efforts.
Thank you, Councilmember Howman. Councilmember Duran?
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to thank my colleagues for supporting my item 5E on the panel on sex workers, and I want to thank all the speakers who came out tonight in support of the item. It's ironic that Lynn, et cetera, brought up Connie Norman. Connie was very, very dear to me, one of our transgendered members of ACT UP Los Angeles during the heydays of the protest. And when I said goodbye to her at Chris Brownlee Hospice the week that she died, she secured a promise out of me that I would take care of her girls. That's what she asked me. Please take care of my girls after I die. And so much of the work that I've been privileged to be part of with the transgender community was in keeping that promise to my friend Connie. The issue of sex workers is one that produces some discomfort with certain segments of the population in the community. And yet the reality is that it is one of those topics that people don't like to talk about, but by not speaking about it, our silence is meaning that many sex workers are subjected to violence, intimidation, discrimination, and a lot of forms of injustice, not only in the courts, but also through the immigration system. A conviction of a crime of moral turpitude like prostitution will mean that somebody can be deported or denied reentry or denied asylum in the United States. So when a sex worker is convicted of the crime of prostitution, the consequences are severe. Many of them come here to escape homophobic or transphobic cultures from other parts of the world. And this is what they do to survive. This is what they do to eat. This is what they do to pay rent. Using the heavy hand of law enforcement against sex workers only ends up pushing out other social ills, ranging from HIV to drug use to other forms of people abusing the black market. So it's time to bring all of these issues into the light, to have an open discussion about sex workers, to have an open discussion about their presence within our community. And by having an open discussion about the topic, we may be able to come up with solutions and remedies to deal with many of these issues. There's a movie showing at the Lamley Theater right now called Blowing Up. I had the opportunity to see it over the weekend. It's about the prostitution diversion courts in New York City. Here in Los Angeles County and City, we don't have anything comparable to that. And it's one of my hopes and goals that through this process of conducting this panel and the work that will continue out of this panel, that we'll be able to create some alternative to prosecution for sex workers in the city and county of Los Angeles. Our city attorney, Mike Fewer, has a prostitution diversion program for first-time offenders. However, it requires that a defendant plead guilty. And by pleading guilty to the prostitution diversion program, it renders that person ineligible for immigration or residency if they're not a U.S. citizen or not a resident here under legal status. So the program that the LA City Attorney is currently using, although he's a good liberal Democrat, is producing very severe consequences for a lot of women and men who are just trying to survive and get by. Los Angeles County has nothing comparable to that. You know, I look back at the history of the prosecution of lewd conduct. Lewd conduct laws were used to target gay men in the 1970s and 1980s and 1990s as a way to penalize them with the crime of moral turpitude. And the first population to go under mandatory HIV testing during the HIV epidemic were the sex workers. They were the first ones to be thrown under the bus by the Democrats in the California State Legislature, and it's still a law on the books today. Sex workers who are convicted of a crime of prostitution or any lesser offense are mandated to take an HIV test, and that HIV test is provided to the court. And if they are rearrested for prostitution, they can be charged with a felony, even though no sexual conduct occurred that would transmit the HIV virus. A lot of the policy around sex work and around HIV is really ill-placed. It's not well thought of. It's not good social policy. And I believe the city of West Hollywood is always good about creating good public policy and good social policy and not afraid of the really tough issues. So I look forward to Bella and the Sex Workers Outreach Project and other allies participating in the creation of this panel. We'll do it along with, some of our sheriff deputies and make sure that our deputies are informed as well. And out of this, let's come up with some concrete ideas and concrete proposals to take this issue out of the shadows, bring it into the light, and provide dignity to all of these workers while they're out there just trying to get by. Thank you very much to my colleagues for co-sponsoring the event, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you. Councilmember Meister?
Thank you. Thank you. Since our last meeting, I attended the joint meeting of the SCAG Regional Council and Policy Committees and the CEHD Committee. The meetings focused on how will we connect in the future. Before I forget, I want to wish a happy 100-25 birthday to Dan Morin. Hopefully he's having a great evening, having fun on his birthday. On the consent calendar, we have item 2I, the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan, and I just want to make sure that this includes looking at our trees in the city. I know that's typically under public facilities, but I think that that is an important part of any climate action plan. I know that item 2N has been tabled. However, I think that at some point I would like for the city manager to come back to us with a long-term plan for City Hall. It seems like we keep expanding square footage in other locations, and I think that we need to really look at what's happening to City Hall and what we need to be doing in the future. Item 2O, which was also tabled, I would like for staff to look at what other cities are doing. I think we had some ideas in our item, John Heilman and my item, that brought this item forward, and I would like to see them explored a little more. Item 5E on the panel discussion on sex workers, I would just ask staff to try to gather input from LGAB and also the Transgender Advisory Board on the panel. And also, it might be important to include challenges of the trans community in terms of job market. I know we heard a lot of that in the last few events that we attended with our transgender community. Want to say that April 24th is Wear Jeans on Denim Day to speak out against sexual violence. Join the City of West Hollywood in its efforts to raise awareness about rape and sexual assault by participating in Denim Day. West Hollywood City Hall staff and community members will wear jeans for Denim Day on Wednesday, April 24th, in the spirit of uniting against the sexual assault of girls, women, boys, and men, and in standing up in support of survivors. We also have small business seminars coming up. Wednesday, May 8th, the West Hollywood Chamber of Commerce and City of West Hollywood will present a small business seminar on everything you need to know about doing business in the city of West Hollywood but didn't know you needed to ask. So you can get the inside scoop and learn the ins and outs of opening and operating a successful business in the city of West Hollywood, and learn firsthand helpful hints from the city departments, including building and safety, planning, code compliance, and special events. That will be at the West Hollywood Library Community Room, again on Wednesday, May 8th from 2:30 to 4 p.m. And then on Thursday, May 9th, we will also have a small business seminar to learn all about human resources and how to be in compliance with California laws. If you're hiring your first employee or expanding your existing team, it's vital to have a grasp of the basics. Seminar topics will include harassment training, independent contractors, payroll requirements, time off rules, and much, much more. And that will be again on May 9th at the West Hollywood Library from 3 to 4:30 p.m. That one actually has a limit of 60 participants, and the cost is $20. On both, you should RSVP because there's limited space. And then just to another reminder that April is Earthquake Preparedness Month, and it's also Passover, so I want to wish everyone a happy Pesach and a happy Easter. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. Since our last meeting, I represented the city at the Clean Power Alliance board meeting, as well as at the Liability Trust Fund Claims Board and Oversight Committee, where we had a special guest appearance from our new LA County Sheriff, where he was interested in talking with us about contract cities service to cities that are contracting for sheriff service. Very interesting discussion, and I'm sure there's more to follow. I want to thank our staff who helped make happen the Kids Fair, which was a fun event. It always is, and this year was no exception. So thank you for everyone who made that possible. I also participated with Councilmember Heilman and Councilmember Duran at the LGBT Center's campus opening of the Anita Mae Rosenstein campus. It is absolutely beautiful, and I'm sure many of our community members have already enjoyed visiting and will continue to enjoy it. We had representatives here at the Social Services, Human Services Commission meeting as well, talking about the many services it will provide, including to members of our community. So if you haven't already done so, please go visit. It is absolutely extraordinary. I also was able to participate in the local stations celebration and welcome of our new captain, Ed Ramirez. So we welcome you again. We're glad to have you in this role and glad to see the station supporting you already in a really great way. Coming up this weekend, as Councilmember Meister mentioned, is Passover. There is an event at Congregation Kol Ami if you haven't already signed up. Also this Saturday is Pawsapalooza. So there's all kinds of fun dog events coming up, and we hope that you participate. On our agenda tonight, item 2K is the Victory Day authorization that takes place on May 5th this year, starting at 9:30 a.m. There's a procession march that starts at Santa Monica Boulevard in Fairfax, but all of the festivities and the ceremony will take place at Plummer Park and Fiesta Hall, and we hope that you can attend. There are some Yom HaShoah events coming up on April 28th. The Jewish Federation's event begins at 2 p.m. The location is provided upon RSVP. On May 1st, the city, in conjunction with the local Holocaust Survivors Association, is hosting our own event at 4 p.m. at Plummer Park in Fiesta Hall. And on May 2nd, Cedar Sinai has their event at 12 p.m. It's important to remember the Holocaust. I know there's been a lot of articles lately, especially about the millennial generation not being aware, and it's important that we never forget and make sure we educate the community. Two last things. First, I want to extend my thoughts and prayers to the people of France, the mayor of Paris, and the French president who are dealing with what has been an absolute tragedy today. I know many of you have been following it. I think my Facebook feed has been filled with pictures of all of us who have had the blessing of being able to visit the Notre Dame Cathedral, and it's just an absolute tragedy. I want to commend the hundreds of firefighters who put their lives on the line to protect it, and wish a full and speedy recovery to the one firefighter who was reported at the time I made these notes, who was reported as seriously injured. And we are united in our grief, but we know that we will have faith and the strength to rebuild. And so our hearts go out to them. And finally, tomorrow is the 10-year anniversary of the passing of the Honorable Sal Guariello. And so I can't believe it's already been 10 years, but if you would remember to do so, take a moment tomorrow or maybe every day to think about the important contributions that Sal made to our community. Maybe you'll do so at the Veterans Memorial named in his honor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have just a couple of things. I guess for the city manager, perhaps you can let us know when the next update on the cannabis licenses and the progress of moving that through our system might be coming to the city council. I also wanted to wish Dan Marin a 75th birthday. He wanted us to tug on our ear, so if anyone out there wants to tug on your ear, Dan would appreciate that. It's the little things that government can provide. I also wanted to mention item 2I, which my colleagues also mentioned, which is a climate action and an adaptation plan. And, you know, many people have asked me why I decided to run when I promised I wouldn't run. And this was one of the reasons. If you have read the report, you see that on January 20th, 2015, when I was last mayor, I brought forward an item to update our climate action plan because sustainability is something that all of us should be interested in and all of us need to focus on. And sadly, our former community development director didn't focus on this. But finally, in her absence, with better leadership, it's moving forward. And I want to thank my colleagues for putting this out to bid. And regardless of that lack of action, our council has made extraordinary efforts in these regards in the last 4 years with our clean power efforts, our water regulations, our photovoltaic cells, working to make new developments with our planning department and development agreements to be some of the most sustainable and resilient buildings, not just in West Hollywood, but in LA County, and that includes buildings like Robertson Lane and the Future Arts Club. So we have been moving sustainability along, and now as a city, our formal policy should end up going there as well. And I want to thank staff for finally moving this ahead, and I look forward to whatever consultants are chosen from this RFP, really putting together a policy that we can depend on to make our city as sustainable and resilient for the coming decades and millenniums. Finally, I wanted to also mention that I want to thank Steve Martin for bringing forward the discussion about who has access to language about our census interests, and perhaps our staff liaison to Visit West Hollywood could work with our hotels to provide them some of that information, as Steve has suggested. I think if it were to come from leadership, certainly our hotels might be, and I would think would be, interested in helping to post that in worker areas. And with that, I wanted to mention one last thing that I forgot to do on behalf of the staff. Colleagues, item 5C on our agenda is regarding a discussion of drug use and harm reduction, and without objection, we thought we might do that immediately after passing our agenda, since we have people here in the audience to speak on that, and people here from the staff who also wanted to speak. So we have more business to do, but if without objection, we'll take item 5C. As our
my
first
suggestion, we'll just do it as part of my city manager report.
That sounds great. If there's no objection, we can take business then. So that is the end of council member comments and the city manager's report.
So before we address item 5C, I wanted to just respond to a couple of questions that were raised by the council tonight. First of all, the climate action plan will include studying the tree canopy, so that is included in there. Cannabis update will be coming back to council in June with a report where kind of the hot button issue right now is the assembly bill that deals with the consumption lounges and the ability for the lounges to serve food, and that's something that we've been actively working on to get that clarification with the state. So that's one of our priorities right now. So I'll do a quick introduction as staff comes down for item 5C. In the last decade, the number of opioid overdoses has dramatically increased nationwide, and this issue has gained more and more national attention. Although rates of opioid use have not risen in West Hollywood as dramatically as other parts of the country, there's still a danger associated with drugs such as methamphetamines, cocaine, heroin that are being laced with fentanyl. At the request of several council members, we're bringing forward a report to provide some background on opioid use within the context of the West Hollywood population. And also this program is going to be expanded to do work with the relevant commissions, both Human Services Commission and Public Safety Commission. So at this point, both public safety staff and social service staff will provide a brief overview, and we're here to answer questions. I also know that there are 3 speakers on this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. While you're getting seated, who would like to begin?
Good evening, Council, Mayor Pro Tem. So over the last 12 months, the research shows from the Sheriff Department that in the city of West Hollywood, we have had 137 arrests for methamphetamine, 34 arrests for cocaine, 15 arrests for heroin, 9 for prescription drugs, 8 for GHB, and 7 for ecstasy. This data highlights the fact that the opioids have not impacted the West Hollywood community as much as it has the rest of the nation. However, nationally, fentanyl is increasingly being mixed with other drugs such as heroin, cocaine, methamphetamine, and ecstasy, which increases the risk of overdose from these substances. This is because it takes very little to produce a high with fentanyl, and it could be a much cheaper option. What makes drugs laced with fentanyl especially dangerous is it is done usually without the user's knowledge. That said, in regards to the opioid, I can tell you that should an overdose occur in the city of West Hollywood, all deputy personnel are trained in the administration of Narcan, and every deputy and sergeant has numerous doses in their vehicles. In closing, I can say that since with the implementation of our West Hollywood Station overdose rollout team, we have responded to 9 overdoses, and of those 9 overdoses, 2 may be opioid related. We are awaiting toxicology reports, but all leads point to pharmaceutical opioids being the cause.
So good evening, Mayor D'Amico and Council. I'm David Jr. I'm the manager of the City's Social Services Division. I'm going to briefly review some of the data that is found in the 2019 Community Study Summary of Findings, and will be in the full report. It's in the staff report. Just wanted to review it for this evening's audience. So this is data that's from the LA County Department of Public Health and also from the California Department of Public Health. And this is reported in trends per 100,000. So you kind of have to take that in consideration the few times that numbers are mentioned. So there has been an increase in emergency department visits for drug overdoses since 2010. They break this data down into zip codes, and we have seen an increase in 90046 and 90048, and we've actually seen a decrease in 90069. The mortality rate from unintentional drug overdose is slightly higher for West Hollywood than for LA County overall. There's 7.3 deaths per 100,000 residents in West Hollywood compared to 6.6 deaths per 100,000 residents in LA County. This would calculate to approximately 2.6 deaths annually in West Hollywood. The mortality rates from opioid overdoses in zip codes 90048 and 90046 have seen an increase since 2010, and those mortality rates also from opioid overdoses in zip code 90069 have seen a decrease since 2010. So as you heard, the data does illustrate that there have been some increases in drug overdoses and in deaths due to opioid overdoses. I want to be sure to mention that when we get reports from our contracted treatment providers, crystal meth and alcohol are still the prevalent drugs of choice. I wanted to just real quickly for you and for the folks here, just review these are our contracted providers that provide treatment services. So you'll see at the top, Tarzana Treatment Center provides inpatient medical detox, residential treatment, transitional housing, which is also called sober living, and outreach. They have outreach workers weekly in West Hollywood. Safe Refuge out of Long Beach provides residential treatment, also transitional housing and outreach. McIntyre House, residential treatment and transitional housing. Friends Community Center, outpatient treatment, prevention and risk reduction, and street outreach. The LA LGBT Center, through their addiction recovery services, provides outpatient treatment, individual and group therapy, medically assisted treatment, and harm reduction. The Recovery Center, as we know, provides a myriad of different 12-step meetings. The LA LGBT Center's WehoLife program provides prevention and harm reduction messages through social media, and then APLA Health provides through their addiction and recovery services, support groups, and harm reduction. So it's our recommendation, staff's recommendation, that we augment 2 of these contracts, one with the LA LGBT Center to increase they already distribute fentanyl strips, that was mentioned previously. We would like to increase that distribution by augmenting the contract by $5,000. It's $1 for each strip. Then we would also like to augment APLA's health and wellness program to develop a party-safe prevention/education campaign. And the first phase would be to launch prior to Pride, and it would have a presence on various hookup apps. We'd have inserts and condoms, flyers at Pride, and posters for bars and clubs. And
the first one is, are those zip codes of the location of death or the zip code of the person who died? While you're looking that up, my second question was about the number of emergency vehicle calls, 911 calls, in which we sent out emergency services, not police necessarily, but ambulance for an overdose call. How many of those calls have we had in the last, you can decide the time if you have the data, year or 2 years or something?
Yes, good evening. As far as for the year thus far, we've had a total of 72 responses here in the city for various types of medical responses associated with drugs or overdose.
From January 1st till April 15th?
Actually started till the 31st. That was from last year. So this is actually from last year. So from January 1st to December. That's for a total of a year.
Okay, Councilmember Heilman.
I'll wait until the speakers.
All right, Councilmember Duran. Councilmember Horvath, do you want to?
Quickly, I'm interested to know from our captain whether possession of fentanyl strips would implicate someone with regard to drug possession, or I want to make sure that if the city's providing funding for people to access these strips to stay safe, that they're not going to then be used against them in some way.
I can say that it will not be used against them in the city of West Hollywood, yes.
Okay. And another question I have is similar about Narcan. If people possess Narcan in their home, is that something that implicates them if they're in possession of it in some way, or it's okay for them to possess it?
That's something I would have to look at. I don't believe so, but I don't want to state without a doubt. So if I can get back to you on that, absolutely.
Thank you.
All right, so let's hear from the public. Mike Rizzo, to be followed by Jimmy Palmieri, and then Carrie Balboni.
Hi, good evening. My name is Mike Rizzo. I'm the manager of Addiction Recovery Services at the Los Angeles LGBT Center. It was about a year ago in May that we started distributing fentanyl strips. And the catalyst for that is that we lost an employee to an accidental overdose of fentanyl that was in the cocaine that he was using. The reality of the story is that there were 4 people involved that night. 3 of them died. 1 woke up at 6 o'clock in the morning, thought that his friends were asleep, left, went home, got sick, went to the ER, which probably saved his life. We initially purchased about 9,000 strips. And well, let me back up a second. What was really scary for me as I did the research on this, and fentanyl was new to the West Coast. It's been a bigger problem on the East Coast in regards to it being cut into cocaine and meth and so on. It's fairly new to the West Coast. It's 100 times more powerful than heroin. The intervention rate for heroin is 1 to 3 hours. The intervention rate for fentanyl is 45 seconds. The normal doses of Narcan may not be effective. You may have to use twice the amount of Narcan to intervene with the overdose. So it was right before Pride season, and I got really scared, because there are a number of people that are casual users, not addicts, that may use the substance. And as our CEO said, just because someone chooses to party doesn't mean that they should lose their life. In January of this year, we purchased another 20,000 strips. We are aggressively outreaching through Pride season, starting with White Party all the way to Folsom Street. And we will be outreaching both here in the city of West Hollywood as well at the Schrader Building, and doing that quite aggressively. It's important, may I just have another second? It's important to note that for every dollar that's spent on prevention and treatment, saves $6 in societal costs. Harm reduction techniques, particularly with the fentanyl strips, are extremely effective. And just anecdotally, the number of people that have come back to us saying how grateful they were that these strips were available has really been overwhelming. We've had people that have come back with positive readings on their substances and said, thank you so much. So again, I thank you for considering this moment, and I would strongly encourage that it pass. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rizzo. Jimmy Palmieri, to be followed by Carrie Balboni.
Good evening, Mayor, Council members. Jimmy Palmieri, West Hollywood, Human Services Commissioner and founder of the Tweakers Project. But I'm here as Tweakers Project and one of your residents. This shirt is 15 years old, and I would have said meth equals death back then. It would have been a scare tactic, and we would have hoped that it worked, but we know it doesn't. But what we do know is one line in 5C for prevention and harm reduction strategies. We know prevention would work. We know harm reduction, or as I call it, damage control will work. This is a no-brainer for this city. Mayor Pro Tem Horvath and Mayor D'Amico, you both were at the HIV prevention providers meetings. A lot of the information you said you were not aware of. Mr. Duran, I know that you are aware of it. We talk about it day and night. These strips should be as readily available as condoms are. These are life-saving devices. You know, years ago, you used to hear about ecstasy being tested at raves, and everybody thought, well, why would you want to test a drug and let somebody take a drug? Well, if it showed to have some other drug in it, it prevented a death. So we can't judge someone that wants to maybe use, maybe casually, maybe all of the time. I still don't have a judgment on that. But none of them deserve to die. For $1, you could save a life. And I think this city, being as forgiving as it is and progressive as it is, these strips are a no-brainer for us. And I implore you just to pass this. This is not a lot of money to ask for, but it's a lot of lives you may be saving. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Palmieri. Carrie Balboni, to be followed by Steve Martin.
Good evening. I'm Carrie Balbone, West Hollywood resident. Thank you, Mayor, Mayor Pro Temp, and council members. I wanted to stress a couple of key points. I think this is an important initiative and should pass. I also think that as we think about opioids, the city doesn't have a problem now, but aging in place and prescription drugs go together. As people age, they will be prescribed opioids. They may not be given guidance. So we need to continue to be curious about that. That's a different type of user in our community, and we need to be sensitive to that. I also think that when we hear the reports about the meth use in our community, the fentanyl strips and other proactive initiatives to engage with substance users are important. I think we need to ask ourselves if we're doing enough when it comes to meth. The meth that's on the street today is much more potent. I don't know that our community is used to dealing with this problem, again, in its same way. People are violent. You can see it on the streets sometimes when you see people out. So I encourage us to not only take this initiative tonight, but to get much more curious. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Spellbone. Steve Martin, and then we'll go back to
Steve Martin, West
members.
Hollywood. I was responsible. I sponsored the first methamphetamine awareness campaign back when I was on city council. And I know we've had a long history, and we do a great job when it comes to providing recovery. But we've been missing in action for a good part of a decade in regard to harm reduction. And this is a really, really important first step. And I really applaud everybody who's involved in this. This is really essential. And I don't know that anybody who's involved in recovery that isn't aware of how badly methamphetamine impacts our community. And, it's just people losing jobs, losing relationships, and losing lives. I mean, over a year ago, we lost Jamel Moore. Just over a year ago, Timothy Dean, and silence. I mean, it's not an issue of being judgmental. I mean, it's an issue of reminding people that there are dangers when you party. And it's not going to change things, but it might change things as far as how people approach their habits and how they party. And maybe they're more aware. And it's difficult. We did a whole campaign on reducing HIV to zero transmissions, and it was all based on PrEP, and there wasn't a word about methamphetamine use, which everybody knows where most of these transmissions come from. So I guess I don't mean to be critical, because I really want to go forward in a positive way, and this is a really positive thing to do. Everything that Jimmy Palmieri said, I agree with 1,000%. We need to get these strips out there. They should be at City Hall. They should be sticking them in little bags with the condoms. I want to follow up with what Lindsay had asked with the Sheriff's Department, because that's a good question to ask Mike Fuhr and Jackie Lacey, our city district attorney, because possession of these strips should not be criminalized. And I think West Hollywood should lead the way, start the discussion, and Lindsay, I want to appreciate the fact that you have. So maybe we can follow through on that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Councilmember Duran, and then Councilmember Meister.
Thank you. I just have a few comments, additional input. I'm glad to hear that the center is going to start showing up at the White Party and other circuit events. However, there are circuit-like events that happen every weekend in the city that are beside the White Party that I think we need to investigate finding the funding to be present at all of those events. The other is to go where the activity is occurring. We know that a lot of the activity is occurring on Grindr and Scruff and other social sexual hookup apps. And it may be possible to do an education campaign, either paid for with Grindr or Scruff. And I also know that the zone at Sycamore and Santa Monica Boulevard is a hotbed for drug use and sexual activity with gay and bisexual men. That's another place that it should occur. I wanted to maybe encourage our public information office to create a 30 to 60-second video like we've done with other major social issues that can be then replicated and duplicated on social media. A lot of millennials communicate on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and other social apps, and creating a creative 30 to 60-second app is something that the millennials will probably do the distribution for us about, what it is, what fentanyl is, that there's a way to actually test for it. The fentanyl strips are available at the LA Center or APLA or wherever we are going to distribute them. The other issue I wanted to bring up is possession of methamphetamine G, ecstasy, These are all now misdemeanors. All possession crimes are now misdemeanors because of the initiative the California voters passed. So they often do end up in the city attorney or the city prosecutor's offices. With West Hollywood, the DA still handles our misdemeanor cases. Possession of a strip is not a crime. It's not like a syringe with heroin. Possession of a syringe without a doctor's prescription is a crime in and of itself. Possession of a fentanyl strip is not. However, like the sex workers who were speaking earlier about condoms being used as evidence in criminal cases, I can foresee how somebody having fentanyl strips in their backpack or in their fanny pack or on their person could be used as evidence for a prosecutor to use in showing intent to use, along with the narcotics that are present or intent to distribute. So I do think we have to have some discussion with the city attorneys and the district attorneys about if we're going to be doing this as a public policy and a social policy to avoid overdose deaths, that we ask whether they would consider excluding from evidence these type of fentanyl strips. It may, if they say no, it may require state legislation to exclude it from evidence as a remedial harm reduction item. I know that there's something similar right now up in Sacramento. It's being tossed around about excluding condoms from evidence on prostitution or lewd conduct cases. So it may require a state remedy. And let's see, did I hit everything I needed to hit? The last thing I wanted to just point out is that I think that with methamphetamine and cocaine, people who party and use these drugs don't ever think they're going to overdose and die. Nobody thinks they're going to overdose on cocaine. You may get a bloody nose if you use too much. Nobody thinks you're going to overdose on methamphetamine. You may end up agitated, up for a week, taking apart your toaster and all your appliances, but nobody thinks you're going to overdose. I think there's an expectation with heroin that overdose is always a possibility because it's an opioid. But with these other drugs, because there's no expectation of death or a fatality, people are not aware that fentanyl is being used in these narcotics as a form of lacing, and it's often in fatal amounts. The gentleman that Mike Rizzo spoke about at the center, the 4 of them were using cocaine. Nobody thinks I'm going to overdose on cocaine, ever. But the reality is 3 of them did and died. And not because of the cocaine, but because of the fentanyl that was included inside of it. So there's got to be a public education campaign about the fact that this exists. Finally, the last thing I wanted to comment is I know that the sheriff's lab and the lab used by the LAPD often uses lab testing to test for the narcotic to determine what it is that's exactly in that baggie or in that rock or in the evidence that's collected. And I'm wondering if there'd be a way to work with the Sheriff's Department and the LAPD as an additional test to test for the presence of fentanyl. I think if word started to get out that 30 to 40% of the drugs that were being seized by law enforcement contain fentanyl, that's a very strong anti-drug message to get out to people, that now appears that it's widely spread throughout the drug culture, and it will actually assist us, I think, in creating another deterrent to continuing drug use if people understand that the supply that is out there is not safe for normal or traditional consumption. So I'm hoping we might be able to work with law enforcement together collectively to test all the narcotics that are being seized to determine what percentage is actually laced with fentanyl. I think it'd be a really useful tool. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm very supportive of us giving additional funding, and I think that a few things that we should be doing is, a couple of weeks before Pride, I think we need to have really a blitz with these strips. Also, a couple of years ago when I was mayor, we had an education campaign on crystal meth for apps like Grindr. It was a video that was produced. I'm not sure if how well it was used, but it might be something that we can bring back and use again, or we can modify it to include information about the strips. But I know that we have something that Simblaze worked on, and this was a couple of years ago. It's like in 2017. Also, Being Alive has an ad campaign as well on fentanyl, warning about Pride season, and I had staff print this out for all my colleagues, and maybe that's something that we can also utilize. The only thing, a suggestion I would have is some information about the test strips on the print ad. So I do think that, we really need to make people aware of what's going on, and we have to have an education campaign that really spells out the dangers of this drug. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for bringing this forward. Thank you to everyone who spoke tonight. I think the data shows us that we need to redouble our efforts regarding crystal meth. Clearly, that is the drug of choice, and the thought that it is now being laced with other drugs is truly scary. I wanted to follow up on something that Ms. Balbone said, because I think we all have a tendency to think about drug use, and we think about people going to clubs and partying, and I know from experience in my building, we've had some people like that, but some people who I don't think ever left their home. We also had some people who are not part of the LGBT community, who are older adults who were addicted to painkillers and went down a vicious cycle where they continued to use more and more drugs. So I support what we're doing here. Obviously, the center and APLA do fantastic work, and they reach some of the problem, but another aspect of the problem are probably not going to be reached by those agencies. So I'd like to ask you to give a little bit more thought as well to how we reach isolated individuals in the community who may be abusing prescription drugs, because I would imagine that if we went and dug a little bit deeper on some of these numbers, some of them are younger kind of party people, we would sort of label them, I suppose, and others are people who are not within that scene. They're not part of that group of people who are using at a circuit party or on an app. They're living lives of isolation where they're using and now have no connections with anyone other than maybe their neighbors. Okay.
Thank you. I just want to thank, first of all, the roundtable discussion that the mayor and I participated in. I thought was very enlightening. The service providers who talked about what their experience is on a regular basis and how they work, not just with our community, but the broader greater Los Angeles area community, I thought was very helpful in understanding sort of where we fit in that whole narrative and what more and different we can be doing. And so I'm glad to see this item come forward. I'm supportive of the recommendations in addition to Councilmember Heilman's suggestion about diversifying our reach in social services and Councilmember Duran's direction on creating a new media campaign. I think that three-pronged approach of communication, social services, and our public safety and law enforcement efforts, all three of those are very important. Admittedly, I was a DARE kid, so I was one of those people who was scared that I would overdose if I ever used those drugs. But I know that that's not the case for everyone in the community, and it's very important that we're having this discussion. It's very important that the conversation exists outside of these walls and outside of these chambers, that we're having real discussions with our friends and our community members, and getting people connected to the help and support that they need. If they don't want to be using, there is help that exists out there. There's a lot of help that the city supports, and we want to make sure that people are staying alive, not just making sure their drugs are safe, but maybe they want something more than that too. And I think there's a lot of options out there that we want to be able to offer to people. And I'm glad to see how we're moving forward. I'm happy to make that as a motion if you would like.
Sure. I think what I was going to maybe suggest is that we move this to the consent calendar with everyone's, unless there's some objection, and then we can move the consent calendar, and we would do that all at once. I just wanted, though, to get back to the question that I think some earlier data that wasn't confirmed, maybe, suggested there were 7 deaths in West Hollywood in some period of time, 12 to 15 months, and maybe that's wrong, but I, and depending on where of those 100,000 people those deaths are happening, certainly more of them could or could not be in West Hollywood. But for me, the thing that is most concerning is the multiple of what seems to be about 10, which is calls for rescue. And if we know that the timeline for rescue from a fentanyl use or any kind of use is fairly short, and we know that some multiplier that's at least 10, maybe it's more than 10. I mean, if 70 times we had to send an ambulance to someone, my guess is it didn't get there in 45 seconds. And so it got there as fast as it could. That's not where this is going. But what I'm saying is that I'm just very concerned about the sort of multiplier effect, and very interested in what all of my colleagues have said so far, is that the reach of this set of concerns is not just 30-year-olds who happen to be coming to Pride to have a good time for a night or a weekend. I think it extends to, we get regular updates of someone who died in their home, and like it or not, my concern or my question is always, was it natural causes, or did it move itself along at 66 or 55 or 39? Or even at 88 or 93. So I'm very glad we're doing this. We have a lot to think about and a lot of ways to do it, and certainly our emergency responders do, I guess, a lot of the fast work and the immediate work around these kinds of episodes. And so if there's any way that we can support you, because clearly you have some of the most direct contact with people who are in the most critical moment of this sort of epidemic. So please don't hesitate to say it now or say it in the future through Kristen to us. We all are interested, and we want to make sure that you have all you need. So with that, we'll move this to the consent calendar, and Madam Clerk, if you can give us the financial impact of the consent calendar with this added, then we will take a vote.
Yes, I wanted to confirm that the funding for this item was not to exceed 15,000.
Plus 5,000. I think it was 20,000 altogether.
Oh, 20.
One for 5 and one for 15. If I heard that correctly?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, so the fiscal impact for this evening with the removal of items 2N, 2O, and 2P, and with the addition of items 5E and 5C is $582,917 in expenditures, $450,000 in potential revenue, and $5,981 in waived fees.
Move the consent calendar.
It's been moved, seconded, and voted on, and it passes 5-0. Thank you, everyone, for coming, and thank you for your presentation. And we will now move on to a very quick item 3A.
While staff's coming down to do 5A, it's a public hearing. It's the proposed fee resolution for fiscal year 2019 to 2020. We're bringing the fee resolution earlier than normal, just so we could work on set numbers as we're working on the budget. The City Council will open the public hearing, consider pertinent testimony, and consider adopting the resolution establishing fees and charges for certain services provided by the City of West Hollywood for fiscal year 2019-20.
Yeah, what he said. Lorena, good evening.
How was the matter noticed?
Claudia, how was this matter noticed?
I'm sorry, as required by law.
Thank you very much. That would have been my guess.
Good evening, Mayor, Council members. I'm Claudia Duncan with the Revenue Division, and sitting with Lorena, our Director of Finance. As you know, through this process, we have staff analyze their fees and decide or determine whether we need to make any changes. I can briefly go over some of the most notable changes. or we can go straight to questions if you have
I
any.
think we'll go to questions if there's no objection. Councilmember Heilman?
I actually don't have any questions, but I don't believe there are any public speakers on this item. We did get a supplement that amended the item. I'm prepared to move to close the public hearing and adopt the fee resolution as recommended.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Heilman and seconded by Councilmember Duran. Do my colleagues have any questions other than those two? Councilmember Meister?
I had some questions regarding the parking, the changes to the municipal parking lot, the Melrose lot, and the differences in the hourly rates with, among some of the lots.
Well, the Melrose lot, it currently operates with meters, and what they're trying to do is make it more, put it in our fee schedules, and so that they can have a standard way of implementing fee changes and putting hourly rates, and also adding the special event rates.
So will the Melrose lot, instead of using the meters, will it be like the other lots where you, because one of the changes is that you can't, that now it's going to be longer than 2 hours. It will allow for longer than 2 hours, and we've had these big discussions about how we want people to move those meters to not be there for more than, an hour or two. So I'm just curious as to why that's changing the other way.
Vince Garino, Parking Services Manager. We want to give people the opportunity to spend more time at the lot, and we're going to leave the meters there. We're not taking the meters out. We're just changing the limit so they can park more than 2 hours.
But why? I mean, my question is because we had this whole discussion about the meters in District 1, how, we don't want people to be there for longer than X amount of time. We want people to keep moving and use our other lots. So we're sort of doing the opposite here.
I think the biggest difference is that we consider Melrose to be a lot as opposed to being street meters, and we do keep the restriction on the street meters to limit that to 2 hours to encourage turnover. Typically at our lots, we don't have any restriction in terms of time.
Okay, well, that was my question.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Did you have a question, Councilmember Horvath?
It's not called out as a change, but I noticed that there are no proposed changes for the taxi cab fees, and I'm wondering if we can get rid of these.
I think they haven't decided how that's going to proceed, so for the time being, we're just going to leave them as they are.
But we're not exacting them against the taxi cab drivers at this time?
What? I'm sorry, what was the question?
We are not asking taxi cab drivers to pay them, but we have it on our...
No, I believe that they are paying. I just don't know how we're going to proceed with the fees in the future. I don't think that has been determined yet. We're going to leave as is. What do you know?
Yeah, actually, it was left there up until January, and that's when, you're correct, the taxi cab fees expired. So we will look into, there is a portion of that that should be removed.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
Okay. Mark your votes. It passes 5-0. Terrific. Thank you for your effort. And everyone else, pay your fees. Thank you. Item 4A is our Metro Outreach Plan update and amendments to the agreements for services with the Robert Group and Dakota Communications, and agreement for services with TranPlan LLC. While they're sitting down, we'll receive an update on Metro's community outreach for the northern extension of the Crenshaw LAX line. Consider next steps for the city's community outreach and engagement plan for Metro Rail, and consider amendments to agreements with the Robert Group and Dakota Communications. Looks like we have one speaker today. Is Mr. Dupre part of the consultants being?
No.
No, you're just a good old-fashioned member of the public. Fantastic. All right, why don't you do your presentation, and then we'll hear from the member of the public.
Good evening, council members and mayor. I'm David Fenn, Associate Planner for Capital and Special Projects, here to talk about item 4A. Following the city's regional coalition building efforts over the last few years and council's commitment to conduct a funding and project delivery study, the Metro Board unanimously approved next steps for the project last September, which are now underway. Now that Metro has started conducting community outreach, it's important that we do two things to build off of the support that we've built to date. One, educate and engage the local West Hollywood community and stakeholders on the project and ensure their input is reflected in Metro's process. And two, ensure that regional support base remains strong enough to propel the project into a full environmental impact report in the first quarter of 2020. Now that the City of LA is taking the project more seriously, we also need to continue to coordinate with Council President Weston's office, his colleagues on the LA City Council, and LA City staff to do two things. One, to bring additional funding to the project, and two, to draft a memorandum of understanding to streamline permitting and environmental review in both cities in accordance with Metro's early project delivery strategy. To do these things, staff recommends approving these two contract amendments and one new agreement for services to provide key technical, outreach, and coalition building support to assist staff with these efforts during this critical stage of the project. And on the screen, just for your reference and information, we have the 5 alignments under consideration that Metro is looking at in their outreach process, and a map of the intensity of regional support that we've witnessed through our coalition building efforts to date. And that's it.
All right, Mr. Dupree, would you like to speak? Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, Council. I apologize if this is not the appropriate forum for this, but I just wanted to bring up a suggestion with respect to the community outreach as well as revenue earning options for this very important rail plan. With the mandatory financing that the local municipalities are required to contribute in the graduated attention that you get, the more you're able to contribute to that plan. I'd like the city to reach out to the communities and look into congestion pricing as a revenue earner for part of supporting this, this extension through the city of West Hollywood. The Southern California Association of Governments just did a congestion pricing study in West LA and Santa Monica with sizable revenue projections as well as a decrease in traffic congestion, which we're obviously experiencing in West Hollywood as well. I'd encourage outreach to citizens and businesses to see how such congestion pricing would impact the city as well, because I think that's an important factor, bringing in revenue for this instead of just how we're going to spend it to voice outward what we can do. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Duran.
I'd like to move the item as presented by staff.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Is anyone, Mayor Pro Tem Horvath?
Thank you. I'm supportive of this item. Glad to hear their support on the council for it. In addition to what's outlined here, I want to make sure that we continue to support our existing regional outreach. I think that while the purpose of this item is to focus on our community, we need to make sure our community knows what's going on. Absolutely, 100%. I also want to make sure that the regional outreach that we've done is maintained. I think it's been very helpful and effective. I know at some of the meetings, I think I see Jody here, she's even acknowledged Joanna and David in the meetings, talk to West Hollywood. So I want to make sure that we're supporting you and that work, and thank you, Joanna and David. And Norm, I know you're not listed here on a contract, but I want to acknowledge you too for your work. We have an excellent team that's brought us to this point, and I want to be supportive of these efforts. So thank you all for the hard work that you're doing.
Councilmember Meister.
Yeah, I just wanted to address the part of this that, from the item that the mayor and I brought forward a couple of months ago, or a month ago. I don't know that this really addresses our concerns on finding out what our constituency really knows in terms of what's happening. Do they understand, you know, what the alignments are? Do they understand that there are different types of rail? What are their preferences on both counts? Do they understand how much money it will cost to accelerate the line? Do they understand how it would be paid for? And and by telling them how much and how it would be paid for, I think we need to ask them, what, how do you feel about that? For the $170,000, we could be talking to, we could do a survey and talk to something like 750 people. I mean, we did a survey recently, the cannabis, I believe, tax survey for $50,000, and we talked to that many people. So we could be talking to a lot more people and to get input. So I would really like to see us do something like that for that kind of money, for the additional $170,000 that we want to spend. I would prefer to see it go to our constituents, asking them what they think about those different concerns. And then something that someone, I believe it was Kevin Burton, brought up to me. Has there been a discussion ever with Metro that the acceleration, the amount of money that would be spent on acceleration, be looked at as a loan, and that Metro paid that back when money is coming in? Because the understanding is that because we're trying to get down the list in terms of projects, but we still, Metro still is supposed to pay for some of that based on, the Measure M tax. So what money would we get back for that, separate?
Sure. Yeah, so I can explain a little bit. So the study that is underway right now, the financial study, is looking at possible funding and revenue streams which we could contribute. So to answer your question, we haven't committed any money to Metro, and we haven't committed to any form of, whether it's a loan or a capital investment. We haven't had those discussions. What we're really doing is learning what the capacity is, because that is what their early project delivery strategy requires, that we look into that. And so the discussion that you're talking about, we intend to have in the fall with Metro once we have the information, the results of our funding study. Definitely, we can propose it as a loan. We can propose it as leverage to invite federal TIFIA loans. There are a lot of ways that we could invest, and our team is looking at all the options. So all of those options will be discussed within our community prior to offering anything to Metro.
I forgot to push my button. Can you just explain items 2 and 3? They have exactly the same wording, so it sounds like we're paying for the same service twice. We're paying $91,000 for outreach and support for the next phase of the Crenshaw LAX extension project and pre-construction activities, and then we're paying $78,000 for outreach and support of the next phase of the Crenshaw LAX Northern Extension project planning and pre-construction activities. So I know they're going to two different people, but how do they differ since they seem to have the same description?
Sure. So they are coordinated between the two, but predominantly the work by the Robert Group is the local outreach, the boards and commissions, sort of roadshow, and the technical field trips that we've outlined. With some social media and pop-up support. The Dakota Communications, their predominant tasks are the coalition building and the coordination with not only LA staff, but LA elected officials. In particular, we're interested in engaging more with Wesson's office, which has been lately very productive. So we'll continue that, and as well as mobilization. So Dakota Communications is very helpful in getting the thousands of supporters that we have been talking to in the last couple of years to the actual Metro board meetings. That's important. As we heard the Metro board chair in September say that one of the reasons that she felt that we had unanimous support for the next steps of the project was because of the broad support. So we had people supporting the project from the South Bay all the way to San Fernando Valley and in between.
So, actually, I mean, why do I do that? One more question, which is there a reason why we wouldn't do a survey of residents?
We have funds to do a survey of our local residents. That's in the potential scope that we have
So how...
for the Robert Group.
How, can you explain some of that?
It's not the way that Councilmember Meister has explained the 750s. I think it's more of a, an online survey where participation is, sort of solicited in other ways rather than a targeted survey that I think that you're talking about.
Would you or the Roberts Group or the Dakota Communications object to a statistically valid survey that was like the one we did regarding the cannabis tax?
No, none of us would be. It would just not, it's not included in the fee proposal of the agreements in front of you.
But it would not in any way counter
No.
your efforts to find out what the public wants?
No.
Okay, so maybe we can bring that back at the next meeting to have a survey happen. Councilmember Heilman?
Yes, thank you, and I want to thank staff and our contract consultants for their work. We have been able to move along the metro discussion tremendously. I mean, we were able to get in Measure M. We were also able to get Metro to agree to language that would allow us to expedite. I think they view us as the model for communities trying to expand rail to their area. So I really think our consultants have done an outstanding job along with our staff. So thank you to both of you for everything you've done. I think this is a good plan. I like the idea of surveying our residents and doing it in a way that maybe not as detailed as Lauren was suggesting. I think that might create too much confusion, but getting some clarity from our residents as to what routes they prefer. We heard some of that at the public meeting here, but of course that's a limited selection of people. I like that as a way of gathering more information, so I hope you'll think about ways that we can do that. I also wanted to mention to the public speaker the whole initiative about congestion pricing or with respect to how frequently you're using the road and during what times. That is something that the West Side Cities Council of Governments is working with the county and Metro and SCAG. So we are having those discussions. So that is something that we will be talking about as well.
Thank you. So I just want to be clear. So this item then was not really a response to our item. This would have happened anyway because it looks like that the contracts ended in March. Is that right?
Staff was planning to bring an outreach update and plan for the next year, and we delayed it by about a month so that we could respond to the item that you and the mayor brought forward on May 4th. And so we added what we felt was a response that fit into the overall plan.
Okay, great. And then I really feel strongly about us having a statistically valid random survey. We've spent over $540,000 on outreach, and if we can't do a random survey among our own residents, I think that that's not a good thing. The other concern I have is that in the cannabis tax survey, when asked the importance of various issues that the city had, the rail was like number 10 in terms of importance. So I just really think it's important for us to make sure that that our residents know what's going on and have a say in this.
And I guess I'll try this. Maybe the maker of the motion and the seconder would agree to add dollars to this effort now to put a survey together. because it's pretty clear that there's at least 40% of this city council that believes that the residents are actually not engaged in this process in a meaningful way. It's clear that the consultants are doing a great job, that they have the ear of the county, and that people are understanding what we're asking to do. You're managing up in a really great way, but we all represent the residents, and if we could just get a survey done and find out if, you know, they want the train to where they want it to pass through, I think at 10% of the cost we've spent managing up, we could manage down for $50,000, probably less. And so I would ask if the maker of the motion and the seconder would agree to that, since this doesn't actually address what we had sort of brought forward, which is really a resident-focused look at what the residents would like to have happen. And I'm thankful that you don't think that that's against the efforts that you're trying to do. I believe that you will use that information, whatever the outcome. But I would feel better as we continue to move forward, and you know, now we're at 500,000, soon we'll be at 1 million, asking to spend 500 million. If I just had something that said 62% of residents want this to happen, or even if it said only 5 residents want this to happen, I still would probably vote for the train, but at least it would be with some kind of certainty. So I'm going to ask that of my colleagues. If it's not right, we can come back with something. I can ask the city manager if that's available. But I just think that it's time for us to get from our residents what they're thinking, since this has been in front of them now for a decade, and more specifically for the last couple of years while you've been doing this really incredible work. I mean,
My response, Mayor, would be that this is what representative democracy is all about. The people elect us to 4-year terms to make really difficult decisions on their behalf. I don't know about you, but I think we've all spent hours and hours and hours of reading staff reports on this issue over the past 2 years. It's complicated, it's complex, it's multi-billions of dollars in projects with impacts that may occur citywide. And asking people what their opinion is on a survey on the telephone without giving the benefit of the volumes of research and information that one would need to read in order to prepare yourself to make an educated and informed decision, I don't think it's a wise use of resources. I think that, you know, this is why we have a representative democracy. The people elect us. They entrust us to read these staff reports, to do the communication with the community, to talk to the consultants, to talk to other decision makers around the county, and to make the best decision on behalf of the people of the city of West Hollywood. And I just don't think that you'd be able to impart the level of information necessary for somebody to think about this in a way that's deliberative and thorough on a 3 to 4 minute telephone conversation on a survey. So that's my reason for opposing your request. I mean, if you want to try to make a substitute motion to get 3 votes, you can. But I just think that this is what we get, you know, the $1,800 a month for, is to make these hard decisions that require that we think things through thoroughly.
1,800, did we get a raise?
Did you get a raise and we didn't?
1,500, I don't even know what it is. It all goes in my Christmas account, so I don't know.
Councilmember Heilman.
I'm actually supportive of having some kind of survey and gathering more information. I do want to caution that we don't have all of the kind of information that maybe you're anticipating. We don't really know all of the funding sources. That study hasn't been completed yet, but gathering information from our residents about what routes they prefer, do they have any preference for underground, overhead, what are their thoughts, would they be willing to pay more in taxes to support this, just in general terms. I think that's something that is fair to ask. I don't think we can expect the public to do the kind of in-depth analysis, but I think it would be informative to understand that from our community.
Councilmember Meister.
Yeah, you know, as someone who's been doing market research since 1982, I can tell you that you can have pretty complex questionnaires with a 20-minute survey. And I'm not sure how long our cannabis tax survey was, but we got quite a bit of information just from that. So I would be supportive of this item if that funds towards a survey of a statistically valid random survey are included in this, whether that's $50,000 or $75,000. I mean, we saw that the cannabis tax survey, I think, was just over 50,000. And I think that it would be worthwhile.
Is that a substitute motion?
If what Councilmember Heilman is proposing, which is a general understanding of some of the bigger questions, I think that's perfectly fine, if that's what you're asking us to do. Yeah?
I think that was the intent a month ago, and that's the sort of
Okay, I'll
intent
incorporate that into my motion.
now.
And
So
I'll
city-
incorporate it into my second as well.
Terrific, and I will drag the city manager into this to incorporate the funding for that into this motion and second. We
Yeah,
will-
if we add to this item, I'm going to round up to $50,000, we should be able to do something.
Not to exceed $70,000? Is
50.
that right? 50, okay. All right. So we have this motion to adopt item 4A, including up to $50,000 for a survey of the residents. Thank you very much. Item 4A passes. Item 4B, Item 4B, no, we did not move to consent. Item 4B is the AIDS Monument Outreach and Design Integration Update. While the staff is taking their seats, oh, you're changing seats, good one. We will have you begin, and I'm going to be back in 1 moment. You'll take over?
Good evening. Andrew Campbell here. I'm the arts manager for the city. I'm here with Joanna Hankamer, the principal planner of capital and special projects. And also you'll be hearing from Tony Valenzuela, the executive director of the Foundation for the AIDS Monument, in just a few minutes as well. And just as a quick reminder, the AIDS Monument is a collaborative project led by the Foundation for the AIDS Monument, or FAM, in coordination with the city for the public benefit purposes of honoring those lost to HIV/AIDS, to pay tribute to those who have worked to fight HIV/AIDS, and help raise awareness and promote education about the history of the ongoing struggles with HIV/AIDS in West Hollywood and throughout the United States. On December 17th, 2012, Council directed staff to identify a site for the AIDS Monument on which to construct and operate a platform for memory, education, and community action. As we know, that site has been identified, which is just north of us here on San Vicente Boulevard. And then in August 2017, City Council approved an agreement for services with Wondros to provide outreach and content development in support of the AIDS Monument design by artist Dan Tobin and FAM. Upon Wondros completing its work, Dan Tobin and FAM have refined the AIDS Monument design to incorporate the result of Wondros's work. To step back just another moment, in early feedback from the community on the initial design of the monument, there was concern that the design seemed rather cold, shiny. I think even somebody said it seemed like sort of Las Vegas-y in some way. And an overall concern was that it just did not seem to have a heart, and that there was not a community engagement strategy that had been developed to ensure that diverse voices and stories were being heard and reflected in the design of the monument. Council designated a steering committee to assist in initial oversight of the process. The AIDS Monument Outreach Advisory Team, or AMOAT, was comprised of a group of people involved in early advocacy, treatment, policy, and are currently involved in those areas, selected by City Council to provide feedback and guidance on the community engagement process. And you may remember those members included Diane Abbott, Allison Arngrim, Bob Schoonover, Rabbi Denise Egger, Dr. Mark Katz, Maria Roman, Tony Valenzuela, and Phil Wilson. In addition, there were city staff that was participating in this process as well, including David Juni and Corey Roskin, Joanna Hankemer, and myself. And FAM was represented at that point by Michael Ferreira, who was the executive director at that point. Among the many tasks that the AMOAT undertook was to identify a consulting team to undertake the community engagement process. As a result, the city engaged the services of Wondros, a creative agency, to design and develop a strategy for community engagement that would help inform the AIDS monument artist in his design of the monument. Wondros was tasked with identifying, engaging, and including people and organizations not directly involved in the FAM Monument project, providing a pool of stories to artist Dan Tobin for shaping the design of the monument, designing an archive to showcase AIDS stories on behalf of the city. Narrative elements of the collected stories were to include personal experience and emotional response to the AIDS epidemic, memories of loved ones, allies, and opponents, political and social response to epidemic in West Hollywood, Greater Los Angeles, and the USA, and implications for young people and future generations. Wondros began its research and strategy development phase in October 2017. In March 2018, it began its story collections effort. On June 16, 2018, Wondros held a community presentation, and in September 2018, completed its scope of work by forwarding the story collection to artist Dan Tobin and FAM, and providing an archive strategy to the city. Over the course of the story collection process between March and July 2018, Wondros reached out to more than 70 organizations throughout Greater Los Angeles County to solicit individuals to participate in storytelling opportunities. Wondros provided different opportunities to participate in storytelling, and the resulting collection, at least I want to say sort of the premier collection, contains 25 video or audio captured individual stories. The city has received the archive of the community engagement process. Also included in the archive is a copy of what's called Wondros's ecology model, and that was created in advance of story collection efforts to help determine how best to collect stories. The ecology model is based on research interviews with key stakeholders in the LA LGBT and HIV/AIDS community, categorized according to institutional affiliation. The excerpts and insights from these interviews are available in the ecology model and also forwarded to Dan Tobin for consideration in his design. Okay. In addition to the process that Wondros was actually engaged in to undertake, there was an ongoing conversation among Wondros, FAM, and the city to perhaps incorporate a digital component into the monument. This component would act as the archive or digital museum that would be interactive and accessible to people visiting the monument. As reflected in the design update, the chief deliverable to the city is the physical monument, however, which has been confirmed with FAM and the artist. During the story process, though, Wondros did hear from many people that there was a strong interest in an interactive digital experience in addition to the physical monument. While not a required deliverable to the city, Wondros did provide a potential strategy for starting such a digital interactive archive and museum. Finally, a charrette was presented on March 19th of this year to review the design or the new iteration of the design. The charrette included members of FAM, city staff, 2 members of the AMOAT, and the council subcommittee consisting of Mayor D'Amico and Councilmember Duran. And unless I think we completely misread the room, the members present were very pleased with the new iteration of the monument design. And in the staff report, of course, there's more comments from the artist Dan Tobin, and we do have Tony Valenzuela here who can sort of show you what the new iteration of this design is looking like.
Evening, Tony.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor, City Council, and West Hollywood staff. I am only going to be using a few of the slides. It's not the full presentation of the design, just to speak specifically about the wondrous integration into influence and integration into the design. So the wondrous findings emphasize key goals to be integrated in the monument design, including the need to speak in a unified, inclusive voice and engage with diverse communities. Stories, the AIDS Monument is inspired by the grid of the AIDS Memorial quilt, harking back to our community's original AIDS Memorial to show both connection and continuity. The hundreds of 15-foot bronze traces symbolize and are meant to embody the souls and memory of people who have passed away from AIDS. In the inform and educate field, and let me see how I turn this on. Thank you. All right, thanks so much. All right, this is just an overhead view of the design here. In the informant honor field, the traces are sporadically placed, reflecting our experience in the 80s and early 90s when we were finding our way through the calamity that had struck our communities. The layout is meant to invite wandering and exploration. Words will be etched into some traces that are evocative of the range of emotions and experiences we went through during that time. The random placement of the words on the traces will invite experiencing different feelings over repeat visits to the monument. The nighttime experience of the lighted monument traces symbolize candlelight vigils, which are both specific to AIDS history and also a global tradition across many cultures and issues. The Wondrous Report affirmed the need for the on-site monument experience to stand independent of technology, while acknowledging the need for a website to complement the monument's work. The monument is itself an experience that doesn't require outside technology to understand or connect with emotionally. The AIDS Monument website, which we have and is evolving, will complement and expands on the experience of the monument, and will have a mobile component that can be accessed while visiting the monument. The Wondrous Report affirmed the need, going back to this slide, affirmed the need for the monument to engage with a broad and diverse community. That is reflected in the tone and diversity of voices represented in the narrative text on various tablets and walls on the monument, which you all have in your full report. The featured quotes are all artists and activists that died of AIDS. Those quotes are from a diversity of voices, including people of color, women, and West Hollywood residents. The narrative of epidemic history communicates the devastation of what happened in West Hollywood, Los Angeles, the nation, and globally. The Wondrous Report, as well as council feedback, affirmed the importance that the monument be a place for activism. The featured quotes are all of activists and writers. There are 2 locations now for protest. As part of the arrival experience, there's a raised narrative tablet facing the bleachers where community members can gather for smaller, more intimate protests or educational programs about the history of AIDS activism. The protest podium facing San Vicente Boulevard is for larger protests, making it a location that facilitates mobilizing the community at times of need and during special events. The Wondrous Report also affirmed the importance that the monument be a place to mourn. The entire monument serves the purpose to memorialize our loved ones lost to AIDS. The memorialized field specifically lends itself to remembering. Visitors find themselves at the center of a concentration of traces representing those that we lost. Surrounded by these traces, the visitor experiences the magnitude of what happened. Beyond the memorialized field in the respite grove, a raised narrative tablet allows visitors to leave candles at the end of a vigil, or flowers and mementos for loved ones any time of year. Wondros also affirmed the importance of the monument as a tool for education. The narrative text found on the historical site has historical information that provides context of the epidemic's history and present day. The complementary monument website will also have more educational information that can be accessed at the monument through the mobile version of the site. And finally, community engagement programming sponsored by FAM and potentially in collaboration with the city and community organizations will serve to educate the public about the ongoing epidemic's history and cultural impact. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tony.
Do I stay here?
Quite nice. Are there any questions for the staff or?
I had one question, and that has to do with the content. My understanding is originally we were going to have content that was educational and that would continue to be updated and change, but it seems like the content that we have is going to be static now, that we would need to do something else and to change it in some way.
Well, again, starting with the physical space, we will have the physical space, and that will be somewhat static, although it can be interacted. And I think the idea through the discussions and the process of the past year and a half is that education will be a very important component of this, and that we do have right now the archive of the Wondros project, but we are also looking forward to incorporating more stories and more information as it becomes available. But again, that would be, I believe that will be part of what Wondros will be looking at. I mean, excuse me, what FAM will be looking at.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Councilmember Duran, Meister, Horvath? It's been moved and seconded. And it passes unanimously. Thank you very much for waiting through this evening, Tony. Thank you for your presentation. Item 5A is next. This is the City Council will consider a request from the LGAB for supplemental funding for an event commemorating and celebrating the board's 30th anniversary. Went on consent. Did it go on consent?
No,
it did not. No, thank you.
So I'm the one who withheld moving it to consent, so maybe I could just ask staff a question here. My understanding is that LGAB has recommended or has requested money to do a standalone event at a hotel to celebrate the 30th anniversary. And it sounds like maybe staff was thinking that that could be combined with the Rainbow Key Awards rather than having it a separate standalone, but LGAB would prefer to do it as a separate event.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. I'm Corey Plank. I'm the Strategic Initiatives Manager and the Staff Liaison for the Lesbian Gay Advisory Board. And the short answer to your question, Councilmember Howland, is yes.
Okay.
All right. Do you have an opinion about that?
Well, I thought it was fine to combine it with the Rainbow Key Awards, but if the commission really feel, or the advisory board really feels strongly about having a separate event, I'm okay with that as well. It doesn't seem like the cost is that prohibitive, and it's a one-time only expenditure.
Till they turn 50. So 20 years from now,
Yes,
somebody will have to rush
that'll
right
be
in.
somebody else's problem, not ours.
Mayor Pro Tem Horvath.
Thank you. When I served on the Women's Advisory Board, we did a celebration of a milestone anniversary of the board, so I think this is consistent with things that we've done in the past. I just want to make sure that there's a plan to promote it. Obviously, no one wants to have a party if nobody's going to come. So making sure that people are aware that this is happening, that it's an event that the community is invited to, and that there's awareness about it, I think is important. Thanks.
And I guess you must be very optimistic that the community will be invited because you have $3,600 in parking fees. I think that's for 1,000 people. So bring it on. Let's have 1,000 people here at the LGAB event. Without objection, I guess we have moved it. And you go ahead. You had your hand there. And seconded by Councilmember Meister and Mayor Pro Tem Horvath, thank you very much.
Before we leave this, can I also suggest, if they're not already planning on doing this, to reach out to former advisory board members and make sure that they're invited?
Yes.
And
absolutely.
Rainbow Key Award winners as well.
Absolutely.
Yes. All right. Item 5B was moved to consent. Tabled. Who's in charge here? Item not me. 5C we already discussed. 5D is a discussion of the Design Review Advisory Board brought by Councilmember Meister.
Yeah.
Would you like to?
Why not? So this is an item actually that we talked about 3 or 4 years ago, and it's about considering modifying the role of the Planning Commission and creating a 5-person design review advisory board separate from the Planning Commission. The item presents an alternative structure to design review and fosters unbiased review of projects at the Planning Commission level. What would happen is the idea is to eliminate the design review committee of planning commissioners and instead replace them with an independent advisory board with people with backgrounds in architecture, landscape design, interior design, construction, building, really just have some kind of background that is more aligned with the design review. And so it would not affect any of the procedures now, like we have now, because it would just be this separate design review advisory board replacing the design review committee from the Planning Commission. And the output of their work would go to the Planning Commission just as the design review committee's recommendations go now. They would not have any additional power in terms of approving or not approving a project. They would just be making recommendations. I felt that this was the right time to present this as we create the new Urban Design and Architecture Studio. This is a unique opportunity to create a design-focused advisory board with members who have experience in design that will complement, support, and enhance this new division. And the idea is to have 5 members, 1 appointed from each council member.
Okay. We have a couple folks from the audience who wish to. Members of the public wish to speak. Irene Oppenheim, to be followed by Richard Giesbrecht.
I feel that having attended a lot of Planning Commission meetings lately, I feel that this is a volunteer commission. These people are not chosen in particular for their expertise in urban planning. I think this, however, would be an insult to the Planning Commission. I mean, they work very hard. I know they do. I don't agree with them all the time, but I know that each of them takes their work very seriously, and I think that they would feel this is an inroad. The real lack is with the staff report. This staff, it's impossible. I mean, they say like 300 more units at the juncture of Santa Monica and West Knoll won't bring environmental trouble. They say that we don't have to count trees on private land when we design. Arbor Day, we're cutting down dozens of trees as these condos go up. And that's not, staff doesn't even count them. They don't count the green space that's being destroyed. Staff could use architects and designers. They look at the design and they don't judge it, or they don't give the board any advice. And so the board stumbles along, and sometimes it takes years for them to figure out how these designs should be modified. So I feel that staff is really negligent in this regard, and that they should be much broader. It should include architects and design and things, so that when it comes to the commission, or it comes to the commission, they come with full information. which they do not come to now. But I feel that this, if I was on the Planning Commission, I would feel insulted because, you know, it's a hard job for a free job.
Thank you, Irene.
And more to Arbor Day, but watch those private trees. They're just disappearing.
Richard Giesbrecht to be followed by Edward Levin.
Richard Giesbrecht, City of West Hollywood. I support the idea proposed. The composition of the DRB has been a concern for years. Perhaps one of the most dispiriting experiences I had was when I saw one board member say, "I like it," and that was the end of his comments. I've seen board members struggle for descriptive terms. They have been unable to recognize problems with the big idea of the design. They miss issues about human scale of the building. They don't understand urban planning aspects of the building as it relates to its immediate context and the neighborhood context. Most importantly, their comments often don't impart really substantive information to the applicant. And the applicant, in fact, may need a lot of training, and this could serve a very useful purpose in terms of from an educational point of view. This composition of the new review board would raise the bar for the city in many respects, and perhaps create an aspirational culture for designers, builders, owners, and pride within the city. So I strongly support it and encourage you to approve it. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Giesbrecht. Ed Levin to be followed by Steve Martin.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Edward Levin, resident of West Hollywood. Don't do this. The item claims that it'll improve the applicant experience, expedite the process. It'll do none of that. It'll do just the opposite. I spent 6.5 years on the Beverly Hills Architectural Commission, which is their independent commission. It's not advisory. We had equal power to the Planning Commission. We could be appealed to City Council. So I have a lot of experience with separate design review being separated from planning. Don't do it. In principle, the idea is deeply flawed. In practice, as it's proposed here, it is utterly unworkable. This proposal is the worst version of design review. A board with only advisory power, composed completely of design professionals, direct appointments. None of these boards have direct appointments. We want a landscape architect. Which one of you is going to appoint the landscape architect? What if all of you appoint architects? Who's going to appoint the sustainability planner? You're going to appoint people that reflect your own view. That's why none of these commissions, Beverly Hills, Santa Monica, Glendale, none of them do this by direct appointment for a very good reason. There's serious legal issues. Under the State Housing Accountability Act, multifamily and mixed-use projects can't be turned down for subjective criteria. You can't use design as a way to turn down those projects. Why are we standing up a separate board to do that? This is not my opinion. There's appellate case law on this. More importantly, it's just a terrible idea to try to bifurcate this. As designers, we don't split ideas of massing and scale from aesthetics and design. You can't do it. If you want to look at this holistically, this is exactly what not to do. And I don't know why we think that 5 design professionals are going to be more receptive to public input than the members of our own planning commission. If we want more community input, more public feedback, don't do this. We would never do this for the planning commission. We'd never have a planning commission of 7 planners. It just makes no sense. Please do not do this.
Thank you, Mr. Levin. Steve Martin to be followed by Matt Dubin.
Steve Martin, West Hollywood, and I always hate to disagree with Ed because he's so articulate. But we already have bifurcated the process. You have a design review board. And if you didn't want to have a design review board, you wouldn't have one. But we've all been to these meetings and seen where there's well-meaning members of the Planning Commission who, as Richard Giesbrecht said, don't speak the language. They're not able to articulate in a meaningful way, probably any more than I could, on important architectural features that, well, you can't necessarily turn down a project because of it. the idea is to raise the bar. The idea is to come up with better recommendations other than, well, I'm not sure if I like that color stucco, because that's what we're getting. I mean, I don't know if any of you have spent a lot of time at a design review board, but I've been to a large number of them, and there's some planning commissioners that are really helpful. Others, oh, it looks great. Some are just taking up space. And I've also seen on the Planning Commission people wanting to be on the design review board, and they don't even have, historically, have not even had anything to really contribute in a positive way. And I don't mean to be mean-spirited, but it's just not helpful. Maybe we don't do them direct appointments. Maybe we do them at large, so we get a balance and we get pieces of the puzzle that we want to get. But this city is awash with talent. And there are so many people that could really contribute, and it might also help you figure out planning commissioners in waiting. But this does not have, this is a process that only supplements. They don't have independent powers any more than the current design review board would have. So I support it, and thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Matt Dubin to be followed by Kathy Blavis and the citizen position slips.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Matt Dubin, West Hollywood. I also support this, and while I appreciate Mr. Levin's comments and hear them, perhaps direct appointment isn't the best solution, but there needs to be something. It's clear that in the couple of years that this last attempt at this has languished, the subject of design in the city has only become more polarized and more problematic, and clearly what we have now is not working. So if the design studio is coming online, there should be a better look at how the Planning Commission also gets those notes. So for that, I support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dubin. Kathy Blavis, followed by our position slips.
Kathy Blavis, City of West Hollywood. Good evening. I too am in full support of this item. I fully respect Ed Levin's professional opinion. I think that we consider ourselves a creative city. I don't necessarily think that the design review from Planning Commission has been doing a bad job. I'm not going to suggest that at all. I just think maybe it's time for some fresh eyes. Maybe it's time for some new opinions and professional opinions of the different areas of design. So to me, this is something that's certainly worth a try. Worst case scenario is it didn't work out and we go back to the old system. But we do currently have design review. This would be a professional design review, so I don't see how it's going to be adding any additional burdens to the process. So again, I'm in full support of this item. Thank you.
Thank you. City Clerk, do you want to tell us our citizen position slips?
Yes, the following people did not wish to speak but wanted to express their support for the recommended item: Stephanie Harker, Seppi Shine, Ashley Shine, Michael Carter, Kimberly Copeland, Polly Bussinger, Sarah Jones, and Alana Roche.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Meister?
Yeah, I just want to address some of the comments. First of all, it's not like we would be doing something that's never been done before. I mean, obviously, you have Beverly Hills, the city of Glendale, the city of Pasadena, Santa Monica. I mean, all of these cities do it, and they're not falling apart. I would be totally open to changing this to at-large positions in order to get a balanced advisory board, and I thank Steve Martin for bringing that suggestion forward. I just think we would really benefit from this when design has become really such an important issue for our residents and our businesses. I think we really have to, as our city becomes more sophisticated, I think that has to become more sophisticated as well. And I'm not trying to insult the Planning Commission. Not everyone, there are some members of the Planning Commission that do have a design background, but they are not necessarily placed on the design review committee.
All right. Anyone wish to speak on this item? Councilmember Heilman.
Yes, I don't support this item. I think when we had talked about issues of design, we recognized that there was a weakness at our staff level. We agreed to establish a sort of a design studio. We haven't really given that an opportunity to work. I do agree with Irene that we need to have staff take responsibility for the design and not try to have another layer added to our process. I agree with Ed wholeheartedly. This is creating a process that is doomed to fail because you're going to have one separate committee that is supposed to look at design that is not binding on the Planning Commission. So the Planning Commission is going to be free to reject that. And so what you're setting up is a situation where the Design Committee is saying one thing, the Planning Commission is saying another. And it just really seems completely unworkable to me. I think I'm willing to reconsider that, but I think we need to give our design studio that we agreed to establish the opportunity to work and to hear the community's concerns about design. Ultimately, a lot of design questions are subjective. There are certain things that I think there might be agreement on, but ultimately we're still going to have the same battles about people not liking particular projects. Some of that has to do with the size of the project, but some of it has to do with their aesthetic is different from the aesthetic of the architect or the aesthetic of the property owner. I don't think this is going to solve the problem.
All right. Anyone else?
I agree with Councilmember Heilman. I think this is perhaps premature in the sense that we do have a design studio coming online. I think creating a body of professionals to potentially conflict or challenge or undermine even maybe the authority of this new design studio that we're looking to create, I don't think is something we want to do. If we're finding that it doesn't work, maybe this is a solution in the future. But right now we are in the process of creating a design studio to address the concerns that we're hearing in the community, to make sure we do have improved expertise in this area. And I think we want to empower people who are becoming part of the studio to do their jobs well. I don't think it's yet time to create a body to challenge staff that hasn't even had a job, even had the opportunity to work.
John Duran, do you have any comments? And I would just say that I think, Councilmember Meister, this is sort of a Cassandra moment for you in which you see the future that none of us can see, but we're destined to live it. And I would say that there is an extraordinary amount of tension in the community now about development and choices that are made by deliberative bodies like ours and the Planning Commission and the Design Review Board, and about projects that are brought forward by small and large property owners. And I think Richard Giesbrecht actually said it best, is that we need to re-inhabit an aspirational culture around our design effort. And we've sort of abandoned aspiration in favor of, well, maybe this is a little too pejorative, but in favor of size, or in favor of financing, or in favor of sort of an ability to get things done. So I think that this idea, unfortunately, doesn't convince people, me, that it will change the size of projects, cause things to get done faster, or change the financing of them. But I do believe that we have this incredible tension in our community about the buildings we're approving. And as evidenced by all kinds of things in just the last 6 months that have run through this desk. So I think the Office of the Architect and the Design Review Board, and frankly, our Planning Commission, all of us, council members, have an opportunity to up the game with respect to the experience and qualities of our planning commissioners, or not, and demand that our city manager get more from our staff with respect to, as Irene said, producing designs, bringing forward projects in which more of the design is resolved more frequently. So I don't support this, but I'm guessing that we'll be revisiting this, Councilmember Meister, if we don't resolve some of the tensions that currently exist with respect to design and the projects that we're being asked to approve at all levels. So you've asked to speak. I don't see that we're going to have a motion made.
Right, so
but
I'm
please go ahead.
Yeah, because I see that I obviously don't have support of my colleagues, I am happy to table this to a future time. We'll say a year and 3 months from now. But I will also say that to say that this is not workable is kind of not true when you see the city of Glendale, city of Beverly Hills, city of Pasadena, Santa Monica, all these other cities have this, and I don't see them, imploding. So, but again, happy to withdraw this until a future time. Hopefully, it won't be needed.
I will just respond and say there are 88 cities in LA County. Almost none of them have this. And when you go to Santa Monica and Glendale, it's not like their buildings are more attractive than the buildings that are built here. I don't think it solves the problem.
I think that's the last comment on this item. I think I'm going to insist that's the last comment on this item. Sex workers, we talked about earlier. Commission appointments, we discussed. And now we're on to item 5G, election of mayor and mayor pro tem, and discussion of terms.
I'd like to nominate John D'Amico for mayor.
Except, are there any other nominations? You jumped ahead, but I was going to ask the city clerk to walk us through the terms before we took the nominations. So maybe you can just talk us through your thinking about how we ended up back in the present.
So in 2017, the city of West Hollywood consolidated with the county elections, and we needed to extend the date by which we certified the election, so that extended the term of the mayor and mayor pro tem to May. And so since 2017, we have been having the terms end in May of each year. So although the city is transitioning to November elections and staff has looked to try to change the terms to January, to end in January to coincide with this new election date of November, that will require shortening or extending the terms for the next few years in order to transition back to one-year terms. So to allow for a smoother transition to one-year terms, staff is recommending that the terms for mayor and mayor pro tem continue to end in May of each year, beginning with this upcoming term, where we will have the election tonight and then the installation of the new mayor and mayor pro tem on May 20th.
Okay, so we have that. Did we want to vote on all these things together or just vote on the terms? Does anybody have a preference?
We have to nominate a mayor pro tem.
No, but since we are deciding the terms, I was going to just see if we wanted to do that and then decide who would serve those terms.
Move the terms as recommended by staff.
Okay, so that's been moved, and I'm sorry, John, you moved that.
It's all right.
Moved by John.
Doesn't
Okay,
matter.
moved and seconded. All those in favor of those one-year terms?
Wait, how are we ever going to get to to allow for, how are we ever going to get to January or February? I guess I missed that.
It's just recommending we keep it at May.
Well, we will keep the mayor and mayor pro tem terms to end in May.
Okay.
Maybe you're referring to the certification of the election and installing the new
Right.
council members.
Right.
That's different. So the new council members will be installed in second meeting in December or first meeting in January, whenever we get the results back from the county registrar. This is strictly for the mayor and mayor pro tem terms.
Right. No, I understand that. I mean, I guess in my head, I was thinking that we were going to I feel like if we just add an extra month or an extra 2 months for the first 3 years, then we will get there. And it would only be an extra month. If you did May 2019 to July 2020, August 2020 to September 2021, October 2021 to November 21, December 2021 to January 2022, and then we would get there. So I'm just suggesting that to me, it makes sense to have these, to have mayor pro tem be shortly after elections, and that same timeline, but
So just a couple of other things. That's certainly something that we can talk about. We're in no hurry to vote on this right in this moment. We want to do this tonight, but we don't have to do it in this moment. The other thing I think bears some usefulness, Yvonne, is if you were to remind us that we moved the terms of the commissioners. So if you were elected or not elected and someone was replaced, then it would be the natural change of the commissioners would be happening in.
At the previous meeting, we had the commission and advisory board terms to end February.
Right.
Because new elected council members would want to immediately start appointing new commission and advisory board members. Instead of April and May and June, when we usually do it, at a previous meeting, council approved to have the commission and advisory board's terms end the end of February. So there would be an election in November. The newly elected council members would be sworn in the second meeting of December or the first meeting in January, depending on when we get the certification from the county. And then the newly elected council members can begin to appoint their commission and advisory board members beginning in February.
And then a couple of months later, after all of that settled down, then there would be an election of the mayor and the mayor pro tem.
Correct.
That's how that's working
In
sort of
May.
going forward. Yes.
And the terms would run from May to May.
Right.
it just doesn't make sense to me.
Okay. It doesn't make sense and you want to vote no, or it doesn't make sense and we need to explain it some more?
No, it doesn't make sense, and I want to vote no.
Okay, all right. So then we'll finish voting and we will move on to the next part. Okay. So now we have settled that whoever is elected in the next part, that those terms will serve for 1 year, and go back to a call for nominations for the election of the mayor.
I'd like to nominate John D'Amico for mayor.
Thank you very much. Accept. Are there any other nominations? All right, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor can say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. All right, and I would like to nominate you, Lindsay Horvath, to be the mayor pro tem.
I'd like to nominate Lauren Meister for mayor pro tem.
Okay. Are there any other nominations? No. All right. I have to say, I'm actually not necessarily clear what happens next.
We can do a roll
We
call
would do a
vote.
roll call.
You will do a roll call.
I will do a roll call vote, and when I call your name, you would state either Mayor Pro Tem Horvath, I'm sorry, Lindsay Horvath or Lauren Meister, and we will go from there.
Okay.
All right. So Councilmember Duran,
Lauren Meister.
Councilmember Heilman,
Lindsay Horvath.
Councilmember Meister,
Lauren Meister.
Mayor Pro Tem Horvath.
Lindsay Horvath.
Mayor D'Amico.
Lindsay Horvath. Congratulations. You're the Mayor Pro Tem.
Congratulations to you both.
Thank you very much. So that brings us to the end of our agenda for this evening.
No.
No, that brings us to
2P.
the almost end. Oh my God, are you all sure you really wanted to do what you just did? Get me through this. All right, so we are now hearing item 2P.
That's
P.
right. Sorry about that. 2P.
2P. That is an item regarding the Los Angeles County Equity Oversight Panel. This item was initiated by myself and Mayor Pro Tem Horvath. I will say one or two sentences, unless you'd like to go first. Okay, we are asking you, our colleagues, to consider directing the staff to work with the LA County Council and the Los Angeles County Equity Oversight Panel to explore options for the city to contract with the county to review and investigate equity claims as defined by the county policy of equity. That would be in a similar way that we are a contract city and we contract with different agencies to provide services. And I will say that it was Mayor Pro Tem Horvath who identified this and together asked me if together we could work on bringing this item, which we've been working on for a couple, 3 months, to make sure that it, at least at this first pass, would seek to work to do some of what happens internally to bring some additional expertise to that effort. Councilmember Horvath?
This was actually a recommendation of Assemblymember Laura Friedman to take a look at this County Equity Oversight Panel to improve upon the best practices we've already adopted as a city, because we are a city that's much smaller in size. This is an opportunity for us to benefit from agencies that have more resources to invest in things like hotlines and other tools that help people feel empowered to have a voice in their reporting and to have a clear process for, God forbid there is a situation, that there's a clear and standardized process for how these things go, as opposed to sort of thinking about what the next best step is. I know there's been some inconsistency in terms of what some of those next steps have been in the past, and so this would just sort of standardize that and take it to a consistent review panel.
All right, would anyone care to address any of this? Councilmember Heilman.
Yes, it looks like you're directing staff to talk to county council and this oversight panel. I have to say, I think this is really not a good idea. Our relationship with the county is good, and I trust the county, but in terms of their personnel practices and their ability to do what is right, I would question that. They are currently dealing with a sheriff who's hiring deputies who've already been disciplined, and they seem powerless to stop that. The county has also not been particularly efficient in its own hiring practices. When we paid for a county employee in their mental health department to come work here, it took over a year for that process to work. I don't think there's any lack of clarity in terms of what our own internal processes are. I think there may be a lack of utilization by people who want to file complaints, but that doesn't mean that we need to have an outside agency which has no knowledge of the city, no knowledge of our employment practices or policies, where the agency itself is not perfect. I just think this is a very bad idea. There's a reason we left the county, is so we could have local control. If we want to improve our own practices, then we need to figure out what changes need to be made to our practices rather than forwarding complaints to LA County. So I don't think this is really a wise move.
Councilmember Duran.
I concur. I think the County of Los Angeles is one of the largest bureaucracies on the planet, not very efficient. To have our 300 and some odd employees get lost in the shuffle of an employer of tens of thousands seems to be the wrong direction. I think we're better served with our people to keep it at the local level and local control for all the reasons that Councilmember Heilman stated. I concur.
Okay. Councilmember Meister.
I was just going to ask if we have any input from county employees on how this operates, if they feel it's a good system, the county has a good system.
I don't have that information. The reason I brought this item forward at this juncture was to see if there was any interest from the council in even exploring this idea. Before we moved any further, County Council wanted to talk with our staff to see if it was even possible to do. It's not clear yet that there is a path forward, but before I set staff down that path, I wanted to make sure that that was a path that we all wanted to be on. I spoke with the mayor, he was on board, and that's why it's before you here. So if there's not agreement to move forward to see if there's information to move this forward, then we won't. If we're interested in seeing whether this is workable for our city, it's just at this stage, we're not asking for anything to be implemented, just for our staff to be able to work with theirs to see if there's something possible to do.
So can I suggest that maybe we can also ask our staff to, I think the goal of making sure that we have the best process available is a laudable one, but maybe we can ask staff if they feel there are deficiencies, are there other options for us, such as hiring a consultant to help us improve our processes. There's certainly law firms that specialize in employment-related matters, and they can review our existing processes and look at whether there are any improvements that need to be made. But I don't know that I necessarily feel the county is the way to go.
Councilmember Meister.
Yeah, the other thing I would suggest is that the city start incorporating employee surveys every year, and also what they call 360 interviews. And also when people leave, they have exit surveys when an employee leaves the city, so that, and usually this is done by an independent party. And those are the kinds of things that we can add right now to our own system.
So it sounds like maybe this is slightly different, which is to send this to the Community and Legislative Affairs Division, John Leonard and Andy, and ask them to incorporate many of the things that were just said. Exit interviews, surveys yearly, 360 interviews, reach out perhaps to a law firm or a consultant that does this to evaluate our current processes. And I think for me, the reason I was interested in joining on to this is because it sort of came to my attention that many of these efforts ended up in our city manager and our city attorney's laps, and that's not necessarily the wrong place for these to go, but the sort of triangulated relationship of employee to city manager, and then the city manager is part of the review along with the city attorney, and then there's just, questions about independence. And I don't necessarily doubt that they're reviewed fairly and independently, but the perception is that there is a possibility that it's not, and I think that's worthy of this kind of effort. So that was my interest in this oversight panel. Paul.
Yes to everything you're saying. So we do have an employee working group right now. It's called We Are WeHo, and there's about 18 employees from all levels of the organization. We've, based on a full employee survey, which was primarily for WeHome, we've broken down some of the issues and concerns into a number of categories, ranging from security to personnel to administrative procedures. We do have a working group right now that is focused on personnel. The areas of concern regarding investigations and complaints, we have tools in place to provide that type of support and investigation. That's provided during, the onboarding of employees. We also do annual trainings, which are required for all of the employees. So we do have certain systems in place. However, we are lacking in terms of the quality of the materials and the education process. So we're aware of that. This is something that the employees have shared with us. I think that Yvonne is the lead of that team too. So yes, so it's something that we're focused on. We can easily provide an updated memo to the council letting you know of some of the internal processes that we're working on throughout the city. I think it would be something useful for the council to see, so we can bring something back at one of the next council meetings that outlines the work that this working group is doing, and it's extremely comprehensive. As I said, there's 18 to 20 people that are on the standing committee, but each of the subcommittees then breaks out into larger groups throughout the city. So we probably have somewhere around 40% of the workforce working on a variety of issues right now. So it's very inclusive.
Good.
It's designed to be bottom up, and it's a real cultural enhancement. So I think what we're hearing tonight are things that I've heard also at this work group. So we'll be able to bring back some quantitative steps for the council.
Do you need any additional direction from us at this time?
Not at this time.
Okay. All right. I believe that's the end of our meeting. No, more.
We have
Public-
two public comment.
Oh, it's not on my, there we go. Anthony Puzio and Stephanie Harker. Anthony, please.
Good evening, members of the council. Thank you very much for hearing me out. I'm a member of the MedMen West Hollywood staff. I'm also a resident of West Hollywood. And you've heard, I'm sure, ad nauseum how many jobs MedMen is supporting and how good it is for the community. One of the things you might not be aware of, it was just released today by Business Wire. MedMen's finances were up 22% from Q2 to Q3. And I can definitely tell you that most of that is coming from MedMen West Hollywood. Our dispensary, conservatively speaking, is one of the top dispensaries in California. And I think that you can imply that it's also one of the top dispensaries in the United States. And I, for one, and I know there's people on the council who believe that such a great dispensary, a business that is leading the industry, leading in the cannabis industry, should not be closed down. I applaud you for extending the license to December 31st, and I would definitely ask you to consider grandfathering in MedMen. It's part of the community. It's been there under other names for almost 10 years. It's a spot that members of the community go to consistently. It's a spot that tourists flock to. And I just hope that you'll make the right decision. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anthony. And I don't know if you were here earlier, but we're going to have an update in June on our on our licenses and the license process.
I was. Thank you so much. I appreciate
that. Stephanie Harker is our final speaker.
Good evening, Stephanie Harker, City of West Hollywood. While we have design and design review on our minds tonight, it brought to my mind that I believe a number of years ago, design guidelines were put in place for neighborhoods on the west side, and we were sort of hoping that that was going to take place throughout the rest of the city. Particularly on the east side, where many residents in areas of Spanish style and California bungalows live in dread of properties being sold, demolished, and a big square box being stuck into our charming neighborhoods, what's left of them. So I hope we can get back to that at some point. And I believe we were kind of promised that that would start in WeHo West and it would work its way through the city, but it seems to have stalled out somewhere along the line. But we would like guidelines too. Also, I just wanted to reiterate and remind the public, because it was hours ago when we talked about the Arbor Day celebration. It is on the 27th at Laurel Park, where the historic House Tara is, and at 9 a.m. And each year after we've had our fun and festive Arbor Day celebration, I've asked Public Facilities Commission on a regular basis that I think school children should be involved in this. I don't know if it's too late to invite them, but one of the council members each year gives us members of the choir, preaches to us about the benefits of trees, and I think most adults already know that. I would love, love, love to see some children, school kids be involved in this and make a concerted effort to have them come out and get to know about trees. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes tonight's meeting. Thank you, Yvonne, for working me through this. We are adjourned to the next regularly scheduled meeting of the City of West Hollywood on Monday, May 6th at 6:30 p.m. Thank you, everyone.